Good morning. We have to start with French Revolution. The course. We have already seen the causes. We should have taken the lecture yesterday itself because कल का दिन जो था, we had the Universal Declaration of Democracy. I think since 1990s, UN is celebrating that. Universal Declaration of Democracy जिस दिन adopt किया था, that day is celebrated as International Day of Democracy, 15th of September. In India, we celebrate it as Engineers Day, but दुनिया भर में it is celebrated as इंटरनेशनल डे ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी. एंड अगर हम उसी दिन फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन पढ़ते तो डेमोक्रेसी आई कहाँ से और कैसे, स्पेशली इन द मॉडर्न एरा, वुड हैव बिकम वेरी ओकेजनल, बट एनीवे एप्ट. You see, before going ahead, let me give you a macro perspective of the things that be. The French Revolution occurred in multiple phases. It's a long revolution and there are many ups and downs. As I said, there are 3 constitutions, 5 governments, and at the end of it, what we get is what we started with at the beginning. So, वो actually revolution है, and therefore it is very complex, and there are many detractors also who claim कि इसमें कुछ हासिल हुआ नहीं, बस मारकाट हुई. But we know it is not true. There are lots of fundamental principles which started to get root for the first time after French Revolution. Entire 25 years of French Revolution is generally broken down into 4 important phases. The first phase is the phase of constitutional monarchy. It starts in 1789 and continues up to 92. ये 3 साल की phase. In that 3 years, the attempt is to take the powers away from the king, establish some kind of constitutional principles, and then abolish the ancient regime, the old feudal system, seigneurial dues, manorialism, and all those things. This phase is not very radical, but this phase is very fundamental. In this phase, the middle class values ultimately trump. So this is the very fundamental phase. Then we go to the second phase, which is much more radical, the phase of radical republicanism. This phase goes from 92 to 94. It's only for 2 years, little less than 2 years rather. It's one of the most notorious, most violent, and most debated phase. इसमें राजा का सर तन से जुदा कर दिया, रानी का तन सर तन से जुदा कर दिया. There is no more constitutional monarchy, there is complete republicanism. The attempt is not only change the polity but going to the roots and changing entire social economic structure, everything. It is because of the participation of the lower classes. No more middle class, it is a lower class. So the violence goes to extreme. The guillotine, or as we call in English, guillotine, comes to full-fledged here. 30-40,000 लोगों का सर काटा जाता है, matter of couple of years. The hero of this phase, or anti-hero you may call him, is Maximilien Robespierre. Robespierre. I don't know how to pronounce French word, but anyway. And ultimately he was brought crashing down. जिस चीज की वजह से he became powerful, guillotine, that itself acted upon him, उसका भी सर तन से जुदा हो गया. So this is also the phase in which we see the war of France with entire Europe starting, because now entire Europe is very afraid कि भाई एक देश में अगर राजा को मार दिया तो क्या बात है कल हमारे यहाँ ना हो. So now the revolution which was in this era domestic to France, it starts becoming all European revolution, because for revolution to succeed in one place, it has to ensure it has no opposition from other places. But every other monarchy is trying to actively attack on France and destroy the revolution. So France gets aggressive. So you have France versus Austria, France versus Prussia, wars going on. सारे मोनार्क दुनिया भर के इकट्ठा आते हैं कि भाई लोगों को दबाओ. So you have domestic reasons the lower class getting active, and the international reasons, other countries' old guard is now opposing new guard in one country. So it becomes extremely violent. Also, there is fundamental change in every aspect of life. So यहाँ पे अगर it's very notorious, it evokes passions even today. जिनको बुराई दिखानी है वो इस फेस के ऊपर उंगली रखते हैं, और जिनको एक्सट्रीम अच्छाई दिखानी है वो भी इसी फेस के ऊपर उंगली रखते हैं. इट इज वेरी कॉन्ट्रोवर्शियल फेस. It comes crashing down in 94 with a revolt again. And then what we have is phase of moderate republicanism. From 94 to 99. These are 5 years. In these 5 years, what we have is ruled by directory. Directory. एक डायरेक्टर्स का गुड बनता है, they call it directory. Republicanism is still there. There is no more king, but now the middle class has come back. The conservatives have come back. They have seen कि भाई 2 साल हमने आपके हाथ में सत्ता दी, आपने तो पूरा माहौल बिगाड़ दिया, हमें सत्ता वापस चाहिए. So the middle class conservative people come back and they provide some kind of थोड़ा सा शांत, थोड़ा सा वाला rule. But that rule is very boring. That rule tries to consolidate some aspects of the earlier phase, and in that phase they need a shield because they are not very active, they are not very satisfying people's opinion. They need a shield to guard themselves, and that shield is the military, and military is headed by Napoleon. So this phase is also the phase of rise of Napoleon, the phase of directory or the phase of moderate republicanism. And then Napoleon rises, so he forms dictatorship, plus he forms empire. So this phase is phase of Napoleon. It starts in 99 because in 99 he becomes first consul. Then after some time he declares himself first consul for lifetime. And then after some years in 1804 he says, I am the emperor. So he starts Bonaparte dynasty, Napoleon Bonaparte. And then he is there on the throne till 1815, 1815, Battle of Waterloo. So we have this thing going on till 1815. So these are the phases. Of all these phases, the questions that UPSC has asked so far have come from either first phase or fourth phase. So these phases we have to see in much more detail. There are at least 4 or 5 different dimensions on which a question can be asked with regard to the first phase constitutional monarchy. There are 2-3 other types of questions which could be asked about phase 2 and phase 3 which have not been asked so far, but we shall see them. Phase 3 is least important from history point of view and also from UPSC point of view. The only thing that matters in phase 3 is rise of Napoleon. So we will not see the details of 5 साल में क्या हुआ, ना ही यूपीएससी की कोई किताब में होता है, ना सवाल में होता है. That phase is relatively less important except for either European war or the rise of Napoleon. So in this phase, we will focus less on domestic affairs and more on European affairs. And the fourth phase again is Napoleon. So this is our entire structure, the phase wise and also question wise. So today's objective is to able to finish first phase only, because we have to give one complete dedicated lecture to first phase. It is important. Lots of areas of potential questions. Then in next lecture we shall try to cover phase 2, phase 3. These are very short stories. ज़्यादा इसमें कहानी ज़्यादा है, फैक्ट ज़्यादा है, सवाल के एरियाज कम है, एनालिसिस कम है. 2-3 एरिया हम देख लेंगे. एंड देन आई विल गिव यू सम ब्रीफ ऑफ नेपोलियन. एंड देन इन द फोर्थ लेक्चर, एक पहले हो चुका है लेक्चर, आज दूसरा, तीसरा ये होगा with start of Napoleon. In the fourth lecture I will finish off Napoleon and do some questions on French Revolution as a whole, collectively. ठीक है, तो French Revolution from start to end takes 4 lectures. ठीक है, yes, कुछ मन में आपके? पहुंचे तो वहीं वहां पे पहले, अभी तो स्टार्ट विद द फर्स्ट फेज, ठीक है, विल डिस्कस ऑल दिस थिंग. ओके, लेट मी सी इफ यू हैव एनी क्वेरी, एनी कमेंट, chat. We did not do last subtopic from previous handout from State General to National Assembly. Shaunak, yes, I have to start from there only. So whatever was there in the previous handout, I was actually reading it, so I restructured it a little bit, and I have added that again in the upgraded format in the present handout. So आज का handout already contains the leftover part of the previous handout. तो हम नए handout से शुरू करेंगे. You can discard those last 2 pages, no problem. ये दोबारा यहाँ पे कवर हो रहा है वो, because I was trying to incorporate some historiography, and understood historiography is not included there. Do you have the handout? आज का मिला है? Let me check. Handout होगा, आया नहीं अभी तक. तो वो फोन कर देना चाहो तो, जिनको भी करते हो. It will be there in some time, hopefully. So let us begin. Now, even before this constitutional monarchy, if you have to be very nitpicking, I know that constitutional monarchy did not start in 89. It started in 92 only. 91, 92. 92 specifically, when the constitution was adopted. So here, okay, let me add one more thing for your sake. Constitutions कौन से हैं? Here you get the first constitution in 91-2. Here that constitution is now changed because you don't have king anymore. You have republicanism. The structure is changed, and that one continues till the end of the modern republicanism. Then you have Napoleon bringing third constitution initially. So you have constitution 1, 2 and 3. Now before this first constitution is promulgated in 92, we have to see how this all came about. So what we have within the first phase is 4 phases again. So the stages और phases, ये terms कोई phase इसको बोलते हैं, stage उसको बोलते हैं, ऐसे कुछ है नहीं, because different historians bring different terms. So it's not standardized as such. So let us call it revolutions or stages. So before the constitution for the first time is promulgated, there are 4 stages of the revolution, which are all part of the first phase itself. What are those? So what we have is, first is aristocratic revolution. Aristocratic revolution. It means that the, hello sir, how are you? तबीयत ठीक है? So it means that the revolution started for the first time in the first phase by the aristocrats against the ancien regime, against the absolutist monarchy. Then the baton was passed on to next phase. That phase is bourgeois revolution. Now the middle class takes the mantle forward and starts to take the revolution ahead. Then comes the popular revolution. When middle class is stuck at a point, it seems as if अब सारा collapse हो जाएगा. तब आती है जनता. And then who are these people? These are the hungry people. These are the sans culotte, as they call it, the urban unemployed class of people, the Parisian mob, शहर के mob जो है वो. And they are the one who now step in. So violence comes into picture for the first time. Lower class starts participating. And then we have the 4th phase, that is peasant revolution. The great fear. Now the revolution spreads outside the city of Paris into various provinces. And the peasants start participating, start attacking the aristocrats and their buildings and their havelia and their mansions, the chateau and everything. And then you have these 4 revolutions एक साथ sequence में होती है, 1, 2, 3, 4, and ultimately after all these 4 stages are done, the Constituent Assembly is able to bring out the Constitution. And then starts constitutional monarchy. तो राजा इतने आसानी से सत्ता नहीं देता. So what we have to do before we start studying what happened in the Constituent Assembly, which brought out the Constitution and many other things, we have to understand how was it able to establish its power in the first place. ये कौन लोग हैं, इनके पास ताकत आई कहाँ से? They were able to wrench the power away from the monarchy because of these 4 stages of revolution. Now these 4 stages are not invented by me. They are not accepted by some historians also. This analysis in terms of 4 stages is a typical Marxist analysis by a very famous historian, Lefebvre. So let me give his name also to all of you in a different color perhaps. So you should know him. He is a well accepted in IGNOU, in universities of DU, JNU, many textbook, and even our Ranjan Chakravarti. His name is always invoked, so we can use him, no problem. He is a very fundamental, very important. There are 5-6 historians है आपके पास historical. 19th century के 3 historians है. In 20th century you have 4 or 5 historians, some Marxists and some revisionists. तो कुल मिला के आपको 6-7 के ऊपर के नाम नहीं पता होने की जरूरत है. As far as the French Revolution is concerned from the viewpoint of historiography, traditional view, Marxist view, revisionist view, बस 3 ही आपको देखना है. But this thing is quite fundamental. So let's start the story जहाँ पे हम last time रुके थे कि the government is facing the fiscal crisis and it wants to increase taxes, and then it goes to aristocrats कि भाई tax बढ़ाओ. Aristocrats मना करते हैं. That the discussion, that the process of saying no to the king itself is aristocratic revolution. राजा को मना कैसे करोगे? ठीक है, let's start with that. Is it clear? क्या करना है? हो गया? फोटो खींच रहे थे आप? अच्छा. I discovered that we can save the slide somewhere. हाँ हाँ, उनका ही मुझे फ़ोन आया था कि ये भी तरीका है, हम ये कर सकते हैं इफ़ यू टेक केयर फ्रॉम द वेरी बिगिनिंग ऑफ राइटिंग थिंग्स प्रॉपरली. बट आई यूज लॉट्स ऑफ PDF ऑल्सो, तो ये वाला मौका कम मिलेगा मुझे, है ना. बट एनीवे, so today's chapter is the phase of constitutional monarchy, the first 3 years. Now, as I said, we have 4 phases within the first phase: aristocratic, middle class, popular, and peasant. The first thing is aristocratic, and the context is the immediate cause of revolution, that is the tax crisis or fiscal crisis. And I have also told you कि टैक्स को हल्के में मत लेना. देश दुनिया भर के निज़ाम गिर चुके हैं because of tax. American Revolution happened because of tax. French Revolution is also happening because of tax. So tax is very important. The French government had taken no interest in the advancement of economy, despite it being one of the richest countries in the world, and England going ahead in many changes with the mercantilism, post-mercantilism, etc. So there was no ecosystem, no system of budget of French. वहाँ पे budget system थी नहीं. And every king by himself is waging very costly wars. Louis 13, 14, 15, 16. Costly war के बार के war चल रहा है. 7 years war, before that 30 years war से लेके शुरू होता है. So entire 17th century and 18th century, we have only 4 important kings, and all of them wage very long war. एक एक war शुरू होता है 20-20 साल चलता है. 20 years war is not a joke. It's a huge economic drain, and therefore you have requirement of money, but you don't have money, so you go into deficit. How do you know there is budget deficit? We don't know because there is no budget. So it's poor people are oppressed again and again. You don't decide the expenditure based on what income you have. You decide the income based on whatever expenses you want to make. वो सब चलता रहता है. The tax system was unscientific and irrational because rich and privileged class was free from the burden of taxes, while all the taxes were paid by the commoners. The first estate and the second estate had privilege, social privileges and economic privileges. The political privilege also they used to have initially till 16th century, but with the rise of the Louis 13, 14, etc., we have a rise in royal absolutism. जैसे रॉयल एब्सोल्यूटिज्म आता है, देयर इज सेंट्रलाइजेशन ऑफ मोनार्की, सेंट्रलाइजेशन ऑफ ब्यूरोक्रेसी एंड मिलिट्री पावर एंड पॉलिटिकल पावर. So second and first state lose their political power, but they continue to have their social standing and economic privileges. As I said, it is an anomalous situation. काम तो है नहीं, लेकिन आपके पुरखों की परंपरा चली आ रही है, भोग तो ले रहे हो आप हर चीज का. Now the problem was that it was a regressive tax system. They had one of the economic privileges which they had was fiscal immunity. आपको कोई टैक्स देना है नहीं, बल्कि आपको इनसे टैक्स लेना भी है. So that was a problem. The rich section, 5%, 6% people maybe were not paying any tax. 95% poor people were paying all the taxes. So it is regressive tax system. Now this went on for some time, but gradually you see the problem happening. The problem happening because of various wars, and wars led to financial crisis. Louis XIV, for example, he fought 4 important wars, starting with the longest one, which is the 30 Years' War, which led to the Treaty of Westphalia. Right? Louis XIII, when Louis XIV, इन दोनों के समय, मतलब 30 Years' War शुरू होता है at the end of Louis XIII and end होता है at the end of Louis XIV. We have a very famous Prime Minister of Louis XIII, Cardinal Richelieu, and a very important Prime Minister of Louis XIV, Colbert. But anyway, so he fought 4 important wars, and he also built a very extravagant Palace of Versailles. इतना बड़ा महल बना दिया, 15,000 नौकर काम करते हैं, and it is still even one of the most sought after destinations in Paris. If you go, tourist destination है, बहुत बड़ा है, पेरिस से बहुत नजदीक है, ज़्यादा दूर है नहीं. तो इट इज पेरिस का सबर भी समझो उसको आप, वर्साई. Then Louis XV, he was 14 ruled for 70 odd years. Louis XV ruled for 60 odd years. तो मिलके लगभग वो 125-150 साल राज करते हैं. 6-7 years war because of rivalry with Britain, very costly and burdensome. 7 years war also was costly on France, also was costly on Britain, and that led to American Revolution. We had already seen in 1760s, right? याद है? It led to the change in policy of salutary neglect. Then comes Louis XVI. There was actually at the beginning of Louis XVI a finance minister, and he had clearly said कि पहली बंदूक की गोली चलते ही हम बैंकरप्ट हो जाएंगे, पैसे नहीं है, बहुत 100 साल 150 साल बहुत युद्ध कर लिए, एट द फर्स्ट गन शॉट विल गो बैंकरप्ट, वी डोंट हैव मनी टू फाइट अ वॉर एनी मोर. सो ही हैड गिवन अ वेरी क्लियर एडवाइस टू द किंग, डोंट एंटर अ न्यू वॉर. उसके बावजूद द किंग एंटर्ड प्रेस्टीज पॉइंट, क्योंकि आपने हमें हराया था, हम आपको अब मजा चखाएंगे. तो फ्रेंच देमसेल्फ एंटर्ड अमेरिकन वॉर ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस अगेंस्ट ब्रिटिश, क्योंकि पहले वो हारे थे, बदला लेना, तो बदले की आग थी और कुछ नहीं था. इट डिड नॉट मेक एनी प्रैक्टिकल सेंस, उस आग में खुद जल गए वो. तो लुइस 16, द फ्रेंच पार्टिसिपेशन इन अमेरिकन वॉर ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस ruined the financial health completely. And now what to do? Even before that, he had started to appoint various ministers. We have 4 important ministers: Turgot, Necker, Cologne, and Briand. All these 4 ministers came one after another with only one thing, that they want to now completely modify the fiscal structure because we don't have money. And all of them ultimately failed. Why did they fail? Because they have no support of the political structure. And राजा पूरा सपोर्ट नहीं कर पा रहा है because the king is not powerful and aristocrats मान नहीं रहे. There is a context to it. I have to explain that context for one moment. थोड़ा सा repetition of the story है, but it is important to understand that. In the 17th century, since the time of Louis XIII and XIV, as I said, there is gradual centralization of power. The monarchy is becoming absolutist, and the aristocrats have lost their political power. But what they have not lost, as I said, is economic privileges. And there is one more thing they have not lost: the traditional institutions. So before the 17th century, वहाँ पे states general होता था, where they used to come together and have meetings and then decide. They also had parlement. Spelling थोड़ा अलग है. Parlement was a local council in every province which used to act as a kind of judiciary and kind of place where the decrees of the king were registered to become operative. We have a parlement in Paris and parlement in provinces also. वहाँ पे भी it was full of aristocrats. So institutions थे, but they were just rubber stamps or not important or did not take place at all. क्यों? क्योंकि राजा के पास सारी पावर गई थी. When you say Louis XIV centralized all power, it actually means he had made state generals discontinue, He had made parlemas just rubber stamp. और सब citizen बोले I am the state. संगठन institution सब बर्बाद. So aristocracy actually is having a sense of loss. ये बात ठीक नहीं हुई. We want to take power back. They're trying at every instance. जब मौका मिले राजा से power ले लो. And now they got the मौका because the king has to come back asking for money. That was important. They thought कि now this अपना समय आया है. Let us reassert our authority. And where will we reassert that? In the traditional institutions. And they were also afraid कि political power चली गई. Now wish to tax us. तो हमारी fiscal immunity भी चली जाएगी. तो हमारा क्या बचा? Who are we then? Everything is gone. We are reduced to being commoners. So this is a last ditch effort. ये नहीं होगा तो कुछ नहीं होगा. So they already somewhere actually they knew कि भाई हम दोनों ब्रिटिश मोनार्की एंड एरिस्टोक्रेसी बोथ ऑफ अस बिलोंग टू द ओल्ड गार्ड. हम दोनों ओल्ड वर्ल्ड है, साथ में चलना चाहिए क्योंकि नया दुश्मन पनप रहा है मिडिल क्लास. द मिडिल क्लास इज राइजिंग एंड दैट इज द एनिमी ऑफ बोथ ऑफ अस. बट प्रेजेंटली विद इन द ओल्ड वर्ल्ड देयर इज अ टसल बिटवीन द टू. तो उसका फायदा मिडिल क्लास लेकर मिडिल क्लास आगे चला जाता है. So that is the context. Now, so I had already discussed with you the three institutions also last time. One was Parlema. The second is the Assembly of Notables. And the third is the most important one, is State General or State General. So these are the traditional institutions which are rendered ineffective, and now they start having the power once again because the king is weak. ठीक है. तो सबसे पहले आता है टर्गोट. He is the one who had actually said कि पहला गन शॉट होते ही the treasury would go into bankruptcy. The king did not heed a call. He enters into the American War of Independence and the bankruptcy starts. अब he starts, अब उसकी जिम्मेदारी कुछ ना किया जाए. He recommends for the first time, let us have the privileges gone, let us impose the tax on the second estate and the first estate. एकदम violent reaction आती है, हम नहीं सुनेंगे. Why should we pay tax? Then ultimately he fails, he is ousted, उसको निकाला जाता है. And then comes Necker. Necker goes one step ahead. He knows that there is an opposition from the aristocracy. What to do? We have to fight the war. We need money. So he actually starts taking loans from the market. Loans कहाँ से? पैसे market में कहाँ से आते? You have the middle class. You have middle class, the bourgeois, the mercantile community, the capitalists. They have got money. So the money, there is a bank. बैंक से पैसे लेते हैं तो लोन्स आते हैं. एक पॉइंट ऐसा आता है, द पॉइंट कम्स, मिडिल क्लास सेज कि विल नॉट गिव यू लोन्स एनी मोर, इट इज अ लॉस मेकिंग बिजनेस फॉर. So again the question of bankruptcy comes up. Again they have to go back to tax reform. So fiscal problems are to be fixed with tax reform. Again suggestion सही वही होता है, go and tax the first estate and second estate. Then he still faces the same problems. Then comes Colon. Necker is gone. Then comes Colon. A Colon comes with an idea. He does two things. The first thing is that he makes the budget public. It is actually done in 1781 for the first time, but in 1786, 87, 88, he makes the budget public. पहली बार budget becomes widely popular and everybody comes to know there is 20% deficit. It's a huge amount of deficit. 20% deficit बहुत बड़ी बात होती है. कहाँ से लाएंगे पैसे? Now people start getting very, we have to solve the problem, otherwise government is gone. So everybody understands the problem is so severe that it has to be solved. There is also transparency of documents, although उसके numbers were fudged. If you read actual history, he gives wrong number. He tries to hide lots of things, but still the public discussion on the actual numbers start in 80s budget. The second thing he does to get his reform act passed is that he doesn't go back to Parlema anymore, because Parlema क्या होती है? Parlema has to register the order given by the king to make it effective, to make it applicable. And पहले जब Turgot and Necker गए थे, Parlema had decided, he refused to register the order to tax itself, तो वो order हो नहीं पाई. So it was a refusal by the aristocracy in the parliament to register the decree by the king that they should be taxed. So now the question in front of Cologne is to bypass the parliament and still get the act done. How to do that? He says, I will go for second institution, that is assembly of notables. What is notable? Notables are selected few amongst the all aristocrats. Amongst all the aristocrats, मैं चुन के मेरे जो चुनिंदा 10, 15, 20, 40 लोग हैं उनको ले आऊंगा. I will make a committee out of them and I will get my proposal passed through the committee, and committee will be said to be the representative of all the aristocrats. तो हमने आपको मनवा लिया. So assembly of notables, but there also the aristocrats start opposing, and Cologne could not get it done. He ultimately नाक रगड़ते हुए has to go back to parliament. कुछ नहीं होता. What are these aristocrats saying? वो ये नहीं बोलते. They don't say that we don't like the taxes, will not have it registered. That you cannot say. It is very unethical to say you don't have any moral power कि हम नहीं चाह. They give a procedural reason. हमेशा democracy या फिर anywhere you always want to have moral supremacy. You don't talk about your स्वार्थ very openly. You talk of process, due process. ये तो होता है. तो यहाँ पे what aristocrats say? Aristocrats say that we don't have right. Neither the king has a right to impose the taxes. New taxes can be imposed only by the States General collectively, when all the representatives of all the three states would come together and they discuss, and only that can pass the new taxes. अगर वो पास करेंगे तो हमें मान्य है. We are not against the taxes, बस process follow होनी चाहिए. But understand this thing well. The States General is in suspended animation for 175 years. Since the early 17th century till the end of 18th century, 175 साल से it is suspended. Why it is suspended? Power is now centralized in the hands of the king. So States General का weak होना, it not being existent, is actually a outcome of king being powerful. Now the aristocrats are claiming you have to go back to States General is nothing but saying that the king is not divine, king is not all powerful, आपके पास सारे अधिकार नहीं है. So it is an attack on the royal absolutism, and that is in essence the aristocratic revolt. इतना ही है, कोई तलवार खींच के नहीं आता, ना कोई झगड़ा होता है बहुत बड़ा, but ये tussle, the power tussle between aristocrats and the monarchy, and ultimately monarchy has to yield and call States General. So the very act of the king by a royal decree of summoning States General because he is not able to get his tax reform passed is an indication that the king has succumbed to the power of aristocracy, and that is the victory of aristocratic revolution. बस इतनी ही stage है. The first stage is aristocratic revolution is this much. The day king summons the State General, revolution of the first phase is over. ठीक है, it's symbolic thing. But वो इतने आसानी से नहीं होता. There are many steps in between. When you have Brian coming up, at that time the king starts getting angry कि why are you asking for a State General? मैं कोई बैठा हूँ यहाँ पे. I will take my own decisions. Who are you? King starts taking army out because king is able to centralize power because of the army. अब army के parades शुरू होते हैं शहरों में, provinces में. You have a very famous day of tiles. टाइल जानते हो, दीवार पे लगती है टाइल. हिंदी में क्या बोलते हैं टाइल को? TILE, टाइल. हिंदी में टाइल, चलो हिंदी में टाइल ही बोलते हैं. फर्श के टुकड़े जो होते हैं. तो एक शहर है, don't need to know the name, Granbol करके. When in that city the French army is doing parade from the rooftops, गांव के शहर के वासी जो होते हैं टाइल्स लेके आर्मी के ऊपर फेंकना शुरू करते हैं. डे ऑफ टाइल्स, द फर्स्ट इंस्टेंस ऑफ रिवॉल्यूशन, द फर्स्ट इंस्टेंट ऑफ वायलेंस, द फर्स्ट इंस्टेंस when the people start getting active, the first instance where the aristocrats come to know that even common people are angry with the government. So some historians actually claim that revolution started on the day of tiles, but Many historians don't count it in that, but we know that there is indication of popular discontent. And the aristocrats, if they tomorrow stand up, they will get the backing of the people. The king doesn't have your people's backing. That is made clear by the Day of Tiles. Then the second state of aristocrats actually has a meeting. जब they देखते हैं वो Day of Tiles हो गया, they come to know we might have some allies in third state also जो हमें support करेंगे. तो middle class के कुछ articulate people, self-appointed leaders of middle class, they, and on the one hand, and the other hand you have the some aristocrats, they come together in one chateau. Chateau मतलब एक हवेली, at a place called Vishal. तो chateau of Vishal पे उनकी meeting होती है. In the meeting वो कहते हैं कि हम राजा की ऑर्डर नहीं मानेंगे. There are some rights which go beyond the monarchy. Even the king does not have authority to change those things. For example, monarchy is hereditary. ये होना ही चाहिए. राजा खुद चाह के भी खुद का ये रूल बदल नहीं सकता. So they give up 4 or 5 points that these points cannot be changed. They are beyond the king. They are very simple points. So we have a public manifesto of a sort of aristocrat with the support of third state थोड़ा सा against कि भाई आप कुछ नहीं करोगे, ये change नहीं कर सकते. If you want to change taxes, call states general. Ultimately, seeing all these things, the meeting of the two states leaders coming together, Day of Tiles, attack on army, etc., and not being able to pass the law, and king himself is weak and irresolute. कोई राजा कोई छोटा बच्चा है वो 30-32 साल का, इसमें कुछ ज़्यादा है नहीं. Then he says, चलो let me succumb, and then he calls states general. That is the end of the first phase. ठीक है. So Lefebvre, the French Revolution was started and led नहीं यार, LED चाहिए वो, led to victory in its first phase by aristocracy. In the mid-1780s, the government realized that without tax reforms, the fiscal crisis could not be solved. The various reform proposals of the ministers encountered the opposition of both states and aristocrats to the led aristocrats. Thus, the economic bankruptcy of the French government and its desperate attempt to find a solution led to the summoning of States General, which had remained in the state of animated suspensions for the last 175 years. I have purposefully, मैंने आपको जो कहानी बताई वो नोट्स में नहीं दी है, because you don't need to remember all this. ये कहानी समझने के लिए जरूरी है, आंसर में नहीं आएगी. ठीक है, कहीं भी यूज होने का मौका नहीं है उसका. एंड वॉट एवर इज रिक्वायर्ड हियर एज अ फैक्ट जो आपको याद होने चाहिए मैंने लिखे हुए हैं यहाँ. The news of meeting of the States General made excited all the sections of French society. The decision to convene the States General was welcomed by all the three states. They considered it as a panacea for all the problems. The privileged class thought that now they can reassert their authority. सब आदमी खुश थे राजा छोड़ के. Now we can reassert our authority. States General will be revived. That was the whole point. They had seen across the English Channel in Britain, they had two orders, and the two orders gradually had evolved into a parliament. States General, when the two orders there evolved into parliament, House of Lords and Commons later on, these are the 200 years in which France में exactly उल्टा हो रहा है. France में you have increase in the royal absolutism, and States General is suspended. Now they think हमारा मौका आया है. We'll have some sort of constitutional control on the king. So the States General, हमारे parliament बनेगी ये. Then the bourgeois saw it as an opportunity for fundamental constitutional reforms which would enable the bourgeois to exert more control over the political institutions and to redesign the economic structure by changing the tax norms, because they are frustrated. They have the social standing, economic standing, but they don't have political standing. So how to get that? How to reduce the anomaly? सारे पैसे हमारे पास है, power कुछ नहीं है. So they were happy कि let us change that. And the common people also got excited because they were frustrated. They were not only frustrated, they were actually hateful of the seigneurial dues and manoralism कि ये tax हम क्यों दे. So they thought कि if State General is reconvened, these taxes could go away. So every section of society is excited in the public sphere, in the print culture, in newspapers, journals. चौराहे चौराहे पे, कॉफी शॉप में, सब जगह the only thing is being discussed what will happen in States General. Public sphere is alive. Everyone was excited and aristocratic revolution ended with the summoning of the States General. The point here to understand is that nobody knew. Everybody was anticipating good thing for themselves, but actually the States General opened up Pandora's box. सारे सवाल खुल गए. For example, in India today the question is, should we have a new constitution? Some people ask that question. No, everybody can definitely accept that the present constitution has certain limitations, certain faults. Some issues are unresolved. It is true. But the moment you go for writing a new constitution altogether, by discarding the tradition of 75 years, it will open the Pandora's box. All the unresolved things will come back, come back biting, and then it becomes difficult to manage them. And issues will not come one by one. All the issues will come at the same time. अब करो handle, नहीं कर पाओगे. Same thing happened over here. So you go to the next level. Is it understood so far? कोई मुश्किल तो है नहीं इसमें. The Aristocratic Revolution is nothing but successful calling of States General by denying the king absolutist power. Full stop. Clear? Then you go to next stage. अब you want to call States General, but it is not convened for last 175 years. Up, what are the rules of procedure? How to conduct the business? Who will be the representative? All these questions come up. So Raja बोलता है चलो चुनाव. So all across France you have elections going on. In those elections, ultimately the representatives, or as they call it, deputies or delegates, will be selected, who would go from each state to represent the state into to Paris or Versailles rather, and जहाँ पे बातें होंगी. But how to conduct the elections? What should be the composition of a States General? That is the main question. और सारी बात यहाँ फंसती है. There are three main things here, three main issues. States General के बारे में. What we have actually is a society which is like this. First state, second state, and third state. Society यही है, ऊपर राजा बैठा है, king. But the State General did not represent it like this. The State General was like this. First state, second state, third state. What do I mean by that? Every state got equal vote. So representatives of the first state would come here, they would have internal discussion and they will get one vote collectively as a body. The representatives of the clergy would come here, the aristocrat would come here, deliberate internally. They will sit separately. Entire State General doesn't sit together. It doesn't have a joint sitting. What it has, three different houses, have three different places where three different meetings take place and they internally discuss things, and as a house you got one vote. समझ में आया? So even the second state would get one vote. And all the 95% people, they would send representatives in third state, they would discuss internally and they would get one vote. So total votes कितने हैं? 3 votes. Now, so the बात आसान थी. The first and second state would never want to tax itself. It would go against their own interest. ठीक है. तो ये क्या हुआ? The game is rigged from the beginning. So third state people, when the elections were starting, before that in the public domain lots of discussion started कि भाई 175 years society is not the society of 1789 anymore. We have to change the rules. We change society has changed हो गई है. State General should also change. हमारी 3 मुद्दे हैं, 3 डिमांड. पहली डिमांड क्या है? We should have double representatives. मतलब presently we have 300 and 300. What we have is 300 each. What we want is 300 and 600. So our house should be double. हमें इतना बड़ा कर दो पहले तो. The second demand in the public domain was joint sitting. We don't was sitting by state, sitting by order. 3 अलग कमरों में 300 लोग अलग अलग नहीं बैठेंगे, सब लोग साथ में बैठेंगे. We want joint sitting like parliament. We don't want state-wise sitting. And the third demand, the voting should not be per order. Voting should be per delegate. एक एक वोट हर स्टेट का नहीं होगा, एक एक वोट हर इंसान का होगा. तो अगर 1200 लोग हैं तो 1200 वोट डालेंगे, then we'll take decision by majority. समझ में आया? If that happens, this state general gets converted into parliament, and voting is done by majority, and majority of people are commoners, so they will get the voice. Now on all these 3 counts, the aristocrats and nobility and church would not want that to happen. गुस्सा होंगे. They would say कि भाई अलग अलग बैठो, एक एक वोट ही चलेगा, because they would have the confluence of interest, 2 versus 1. They will not form any tax reform. तो बात यहाँ पे अड़ गई. ऐसे Pandora's box open हो गया. It's a political crisis that is going to happen. Now during the elections taking place, king thought कि यार, I saw on the day of tiles कि people are angry with me. Let me try to play some populist game. थोड़ा जनता की सहानुभूति मुझे भी तो मिले. Against these aristocrats and church, I want to increase my own power base in society. So I will do a couple of things. The first thing the king told is that all the towns and villages and provinces, when you elect your representative, आप अपने मीटिंगें करो. You hold your own joint meeting in every locality, and you collect your grievances, and you put the grievances, आपके जो समस्याएं हैं, आपकी जो problems है, you put them in a document, a register. That register is called as cahiers. I don't know how to pronounce this word, but let us call it cahiers. Letters be cahiers. Or when your deputy would come to the meeting, he would bring that cahier with him. एक रजिस्टर होगा जिसमें सारे ग्रीवांसेस, आप चाहते क्या है हमसे, व्हाट डू यू एक्सपेक्ट, आपके एस्पिरेशंस, डिमांड्स क्या है, एंड दोस कैहियर्स विल बी टेकन इनटू कंसीडरेशन इन द डेलिब्रेशन. तो पूरे फ्रांस में पहली बार हमारी समस्या, हमारा रिप्रेजेंटेटिव, हमारा इलेक्शन. तो ये हो गया. द सेकेंड थिंग दैट द किंग डिड, ही सेड कोई बात नहीं, आई एम विथ यू, so I accept you, I accept doubling the representatives. मान लिया चलो, because king के मन में क्या है, जनता को खुश करो. On one hand, the king does not intend to do other 2 things. So even if it is doubled, it still has only 1 single vote. पूरा गेम प्लान उसका वो था, डबल आपके 300 के 600 कर दो, but as a 600 का ब्लॉक you will still get only 1 single vote. The aristocracy has 1 vote and the church has 1 vote. So 2:1, I will still win in the end. But let me get some popularity in the meanwhile. The second thing that the king did, he accepted doubling the third. That doubling the third is doubling of the representatives. Elections के पहले ही होता है. So when the States General is being convened, you have exact numbers तो है नहीं, numbers are a little bit different, but by and large 300, 300 and 600 people. समझ में आया? पक्का? Okay. So elections during early 1789, you have doubling of the third. As the press began to demand that the commons be allocated more delegates to bolster his failing popularity, the king, as per advice of Necker, who was dismissed earlier, has now come back. And because of his advice being accepted by the king and the doubling of the third happened because of his advice, he becomes very popular. Necker gets extreme popularity across France in 1789 and after coming back, उसके सलाह के वजह से राजा ने doubling the third accept किया है. Acceded to the measure of doubling the third. This was opposed by the aristocrats and the nobles and the church, but their opposition was not heeded. देखा जाएगा. So that is the first stage that occurs. And second thing is that you have cahiers. So यहाँ पे doubling the third itself is an indication of the first victory of bourgeois. Because who is managing newspaper, who is writing articles, who is creating public opinion? It's bourgeois. So in the second phase of the revolution, in the second stage of the revolution, in bourgeois revolution, the first salvo came from the public. The king had to accept public's demand. बुर्जवा का पहला बॉल पे तो वो जीत गए, छक्का मार दिया. But it was a very wrong decision on king's part. Then king actually had certain calculations in mind about what will happen in the election and how the things will go by. उसका पूरा गेम प्लान बना के 30 साल का बंदा, उसको क्या पता पॉलिटिक्स कैसे होता है. He had expected aristocracy to support him completely in the meeting against the middle class. अगर कोई प्रपोजल आता है तो उसके खिलाफ. But problem happened that amongst the nobles, almost 1/3 were liberal minded. We have seen in yesterday's lecture, previous lecture, that within each state there is class difference coming up, right? State, first state के अंदर in the nobility, in the church, you have upper clergy and lower clergy. Lower clergy comes from common people. याद है? In the second state, we have some nobles of sword, nobles of robe. Some nobles are away from the Paris city and they are not as rich. They are dependent on status and money, dependent on for status and money, dependent middle class. So almost 1/3 nobles are not rich. The interest of them don't align with the rich nobles and with the monarchy. वो तो चाहते कि reform हो, and they got elected. तो पहला बात तो even within the second state, 1/3 is not pro king. Secondly, you come to clergy. In the clergy, in the first state also, you will see the electorate returned mainly parish priest, almost 50% of them. So the lower clergy and higher clergy, you have bishops, 130 odd bishops were there, some archbishop were there, but the parish local clergy जो थी वो खुद आती थी कहाँ से? थर्ड स्टेट से, वो चुन के ज़्यादा आ गए. तो 50% of the representatives of the first state were poor people. They were dissatisfied within the church already. We have discussed that. याद है? अब परसों का लेक्चर मिस कर दिए, ठीक है, देख लेना बाद में. And then in the third state, elections return predominantly the middle class, the lawyers, the journalists, the magistrates, etc. And among them also you will see amount हो गया क्या? Among this, among the third state representatives, there were men like Monier, Barnave, Target, and even Robespierre. Interestingly, some of the nobles also who did not get elected or did not get any chance to become part of the second state got elected to the third state. So ऐसे भी we have some people, for example, we have Mirabeau and Lafayette. So they were renegade nobles elected in the third state. Mirabeau has a very important role to play. Lafayette को हम already देख चुके हैं. Lafayette was there in the American War of Independence, if you can remember, right, from French side. So these people who are originally nobles but got elected from the third state. So total nobility is actually 400. Of the seats were 300. क्योंकि 100 लोग तो यहाँ से चुन के आ गए from the third state. क्योंकि वहाँ को डबलिंग हो चुका था, एक्स्ट्रा सीट्स थे. And then some clergy also got elected from third state. The most important one here is Abbe CS. Abbe माने father, Abbot. CS was his name. So you have the third state भी इतनी हल्की नहीं है, वहाँ भी कद्दावर नेता है. That is the main point. So elections are done. Now after the elections, from January, February, March, April, elections are done. In the month of May, you have the opening of the States General. सब जगह चैतन्य की लहर, क्या होगा? So the representative of the third state came to attend the session of State General with great enthusiasm. पूरा पेरिस से लेके वर्साय तक बहुत बड़ा जुलूस निकला था. It was a huge जुलूस. के बारे में पत्रकार जा रहे, लोग ढोल ताशा नगाड़ा लेके जा रहे कि हम जाएंगे. 175 साल जो चीज़ नहीं हुई थी. And they wanted to resolve all their problems. So from all across France, the representatives came to Paris और पूरा जलसा निकाल के जा रहे वो वर्साय तक. The king used to write a diary. You know that. King used to write diary. If you look at his diary, what had he written on that day? उसकी डायरी एंट्री क्या है उस दिन की? उसने लिखा है, वेंट फॉर हंटिंग, नथिंग हैपेंड. शिकार के लिए गए तो कुछ मिला ही नहीं. मतलब देश के इतिहास में क्या चल रहा है और राजा को कुछ फिक्र ही नहीं है कुछ उसको. मतलब ही डिड नॉट इवन टू कॉग्निजेंस ऑफ व्हाट इज हैपनिंग इन द कंट्री. तो चिल्लर चीज है, क्या है इसमें? हंटिंग, शेर के शिकार करेंगे. So, so they came with great enthusiasm. They brought the letter of grievances carriers with them, but there was no indication of joint session. After coming there, they came to know that there is no joint session. हर एक को अलग अलग बिठाया जा रहा है. The king, after inaugural address on 6th May, left the hall asking the orders to have their separate sessions. Despite granting double representation, traditional voting by order was to continue. जो पहला गेम प्लान था. अब जाके होता है political crisis. Then the people get angry. We have got carriers. हमारी आशा आकांक्षा थी. You had given us indication that you will have a joint session. You doubled the third also, and now आप गद्दारी कर रहे हो, ये नहीं चलेगा. Then the people get angry. But still the tussle, the crisis goes on, the meetings go on, बातें चलती रहती है. The third state wanted to meet as one body, and for each delegate to have one vote. They demanded a joint sitting like a parliament. This demand was rejected by the king and the representatives of the privileged class. The stalemate continued for about एक महीना. बातें अलग अलग ही चली. All the three people sat separately for 1 month, discussed some things, but the third state continued to ask कि नहीं, ये नहीं चलेगा. After a month, there was second royal address. So, in the day of 22nd June, राजा ने कहा कि एक महीना हो चुका है, 1.5 महीना, अब मैं दोबारा भाषण दूंगा आके. In that second royal address, he made it, ठीक है, इस दिन होगा. उसके 1-2 दिन पहले third state again came back to the hall. When it came, it found out कि हॉल बंद है, बिकॉज राजा ने दरवाजे को ताला लगाया था. राजा में कितना बचकानी हरकत है. The king perhaps thought that if I don't allow them entry into the hall, जो अभी हमारे यहाँ भी कहीं हुआ था, आपको सभा में आने नहीं देंगे, हाउस के अंदर एंट्री नहीं होगी. हाउ कैन यू टेक डिसीजन इफ द रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स आर नॉट, they refuse entry into the hall, they cannot take decisions, they cannot participate, they cannot do anything. तो लोगों ने बोला ठीक है, हमारा हॉल गया भाड़ में. हम लोग मैटर करता है, जगह मैटर नहीं करती. So they found an indoor tennis court just beside in the Versailles Palace के बगल में ही, and they all assembled in the tennis court. 600 लोग वहाँ पे पूरी भगदड़ मची थी. And they decided will not leave the tennis court till the time हमारी मांगे पूरी करो. We have something called as tennis court oath. The assembly then went out, taking their deliberations to the nearby indoor tennis court, where they proceeded to swear the tennis court oath. The oath read, "We will not disband until we have constructed a nation of individual citizens instead of kingdom of servile subjects. We are not part of state." हर एक का एक वैल्यू है, everybody is a citizen. जब तक वो नहीं होगा तब तक हम यहाँ से हिलेंगे नहीं. The oath was proposed by Jan Joseph Monnier. He said there is no going away and the nation would remain united as long as the State General was not reorganized as National Assembly. So let us make a National Assembly. So they are doing just two simple things. Firstly, they declared themselves as national. हम ही जनता है. We are the National Assembly. So we are no more third state. We are the Assembly. अगर फर्स्ट सेकंड के लोगों को हम साथ आना है तो आइए. If you come, better with you. If you don't come, without you. हम तो जा रहे हैं. हम जनता के रिप्रेजेंटेटिव हैं. आना है तो आइए, वरना जाइए. We are no more third state only. That is the point. So they declared themselves to be the National Assembly, the assembly of not of the state, but of the people. And they invited the other orders to join them, but made it clear that they intended to conduct the nation's affairs with or without them. अब बात अड़ गई. Tennis court oath is a very important. The second salvo that came from the middle class. अब हम झुकेंगे नहीं. Doubling the third, first thing. Secondly, tennis court oath. Bourgeois revolution कैसे आगे जा रही है. राजा भी चतुर. The king says, कोई बात नहीं, आप अगर भिड़े हो तो हम भी भिड़ते हैं. If you have taken bold decisions that you are starting the revolution, not denying my authority, I will show you my authority. I'll bring the army. The king brings army. Now this is a very crucial juncture in the history of revolution. A similar story had played multiple times in multiple other countries on multiple other occasions. The most famous example in our syllabus is something that happens in 1848 in Prussia. In Prussia, at a place called Frankfurt, there is Frankfurt Assembly. There also 48, मतलब यहाँ से 50 साल के बाद वाली बात है. There also the representatives of middle class come in कि हम पार्लियामेंट बनाएंगे, विल पास आवर ओन कानून. किंग सेंड्स आर्मी और सबको भगा देता है, पकड़ पकड़ के एक एक को पटका देता है. हियर द किंग वांट्स टू, एंड वहां पे रिवोल्यूशन फेल होती है. 1848 इन जर्मनी और इन प्रशिया इज अ फेल्यूर. रिवोल्यूशन डिड नॉट सक्सेड. यहाँ भी आशंका थी कि नाउ द आर्मी हैज कम इन, द मिडिल क्लास रिवोल्यूशन कैन बी जस्ट ब्रश्ड असाइड. उसी समय एक और बात होती है, एक हफ्ता, इट टेक्स 1 वीक. टेनिस कोर्ट से वो एक हफ्ता निकलते नहीं है, वही बैठे रहते हैं. खबर फैलती है पूरे शहर में. और द सिटी ऑफ पेरिस हैज मॉब्स, एज आई सेड, पेरिशियन मॉब्स, जो कि पूरे देश से भूखे लोग आए काम ढूंढने के लिए. दे गेट एंग्री. दे हैड वोटेड, दे हैड सेंड देयर कैरियर्स, दे हैड एक्सपेक्टेशन कि मिडिल क्लास इज रिप्रेजेंटिंग अस, दे वुड गेट समथिंग डन. आर्मी कैसे आ सकती है? तो दीज पीपल नाउ गैदर एंड दे सराउंड एंटर टेनिस कोर्ट विद देयर ओन ह्यूमन चेन. हम नहीं आने देंगे, हम अपने लोगों को रक्षा करेंगे. द किंग हैज नो रोल. अब राजा बोलता है, कितने लोगों को मारूं मैं? द मॉब विल किल माई सेल्फ. द किंग सकम्स. द किंग एक्सेप्ट्स कि यू आर द पार्लियामेंट, यू डिसाइड द लॉ. द फर्स्ट एंड सेकंड स्टेट को भी मानना पड़ता है. वहाँ पे कुछ लोग जो नहीं मानते निकल पड़ते हैं. दोज पीपल हु एक्सेप्ट, दे गो एंड जॉइन इट. So large number of first and second state also dissolves itself and join the third state. That becomes the National Constituent Assembly. It could succeed because of the muscle power given to it by lower class. Middle class अपने आप से नहीं कर पाता. In 1840 it tried to do, it failed in Germany. यहाँ पे it had the support of lower class, तब किया उसने. And the declaration of it as National Assembly is success of Bourgeois Revolution. So the Aristocratic Revolution succeeded in calling states general. The bourgeois revolution succeeded in converting that into a parliament. Not parliament, the National Constituent Assembly. समझ में आया? ठीक. I don't know the exact history of the word, but in the case of France पहली बार हुआ है. When you say nation, उस context में nation of people रूसो आ जाता है. The monarch now sent the army to vacate the tennis court. However, in the meantime, the news of all this tug of war broke out. Artisans and peasants, the mob of Paris, called Sans-Culottes, surrounded them, and thus police army did not dare to crush them with iron hand. Middle class leadership was saved by the active role of the lower classes. Failing to disperse the delegates, Louis reluctantly recognized the validity of on 27th June. So from 28th June to 27th June, एक हफ्ते का ड्रामा है टेनिस कोर्ट का पूरा. The State General had ceased to exist, having become the National Assembly. Now some of those representatives of the nobility who had still stood apart also joined National Assembly. However, the majority remained to be the bourgeois in nature. So even after them joining it, क्योंकि डबल यहाँ पे हुए थे, the middle class are more numerous, more prominent. The assembly renamed itself as National Constituent Assembly. Now I have purposefully used this name because in some books you will see they call it only National Assembly, and in some other books they call it only Constituent Assembly. It becomes too confusing after National Assembly bhi hai, then Legislative Assembly comes, then National Convention comes, और दिमाग का पूरा रायता दही भरता हो जाता है. आपने देखा होगा कौन सी असेंबली कब क्या कर रही है. So I have preferred to call it National Constituent Assembly to not have any confusion. ठीक है. On the 9th of July and began to function as the governing body and constitution drafter. तो ये हो गई बात. तो वो तो साथ में आ गए. Let me go on and see if there are any doubts. Any queries? But I'm not able to see names of people here for some reason. I don't know who is all online. Okay, Shaunak, Sudeep, etc. Okay. Any doubt? No doubt. Let us move on then. Now comes the next stage, the popular stage. We have already seen the popular participation faintly on the Day of Tiles in 1788. We have also seen them surrounding the tennis court to give muscle power to protect the middle class. But वो सब थोड़ा सा कम एक्टिव रोल था. The real role comes in this phase. यहाँ पे बात क्या है कि now the National Assembly is formed, State General has become National Assembly, but the king, the aristocrats, उसके king के जो सलाहकार हैं, they have not decided हमें करना क्या है. मान तो लिया, जबरदस्ती में मानना पड़ा, but what will be our next move? The king has not decided. हमारी अगली चाल क्या होगी? तो क्या करता है राजा? Soon the king asked the army to parade the streets of Paris and Versailles. तो रूट मार्च जो आज भी होता है, तो army starts assembling and start parading. Now that is expected to send a message to people कि खबरदार, I have the muscle power, बड़ा कुचल दूंगा. The people get much more angry. ये क्या बात हुई? If the army is coming on the streets, it may tomorrow go and kill those 600 people very easily. So the bourgeois revolution success came under threat. People thought that अब तो राजा इनको खत्म कर देगा, violence will be perpetrated and the bourgeois revolution will be trampled. जो कोशिश करी थी टेनिस कोर्ट पे, वहां पे उस समय नहीं हो पाई. After 1 week or 10 days, the king is now trying to do and destroyed. The people is already a very veritable tinder box. वहाँ पे बहुत गोला बारूद भर चुका है एंड एक बस चिंगारी लग जाए फटने वाला है. People are already very angry because, as I discussed yesterday, they have the national calamities going on. खाना है नहीं. मेरी एंटोनिम पे गुस्सा भी हो चुके हैं वो. I talked about 50% sawdust in bread. हंगरी लोग अपने गांव छोड़ के शहर में आए हैं, कैरियर भेजे, इलेक्शन हुआ है, अब खत्म कर दे. तो पीपल एट अ पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम गो रेस्टलेस. वहाँ पे रूमर्स भी फैलना शुरू होती है एंड देन दे स्टार्ट एक्टिंग. तो अब मिडिल क्लास के हाथ से भी बात चली गई, अब बात रास्ते पे उतर के आई. तो आदमी हाथ में डंडा लेके, चाकू लेके, छुरा लेके, तलवार लेके यहाँ मार काट, रैंडम वायलेंस ऑन स्ट्रीट स्टार्ट्स, मॉब वायलेंस, एंड दैट इज स्टार्टेड बाय द सांस्कुलेट ऑन द स्ट्रीट ऑफ पेरिस. दैट इज कॉल्ड एज ग्रेट फियर. So soon the king asked the army to parade the streets. This was seen as a direct affront by the third estate. Bourgeois revolution, which had won when the State General was converted into the National Assembly, seemed lost when the king decided to have recourse to army. It produced revolutionary mentality. That term is used by Lefebvre. He says it created revolutionary mentality. अब मतलब आग पड़ी. This mentality is of insurrection had two aspects: great hope and great fear. Great hope was a very positive thing. Expectations of quick reforms. आप सब लोग इकट्ठा आए हो, कुछ करो हमारे लिए जल्दी. Bring the prices down, make the food affordable, bring some economic change. Great hope. But that great hope seemed to be turning into a great fear because of such kind of counter-revolutionary activities possibly with the army. So people became impatient and this hope was turned into fear. Already lack of food supplies, and now the rumors started to spread. Rumors have a huge role to play in this, and in next part also you will see rumors have a huge role to play. The rumors of aristocratic conspiracy going around that the aristocrats and monarch were trying to bring brigands from outside, गुंडे लेके आएंगे बाहर से, collaborate with foreign powers. Foreign power क्योंकि वहाँ भी राजा है, they will send their army to destroy people's initiative and overthrow the third estate. बाहर से गुंडे और देश के बाहर से सत्ता, आर्मी लेके आएंगे और हमें खत्म कुचल देंगे. ये लोगों के मन में अफवाह थी, भाई उनकी आर्मी कल आ रही है, उनकी आर्मी परसों आ रही है. अब शहर में कोई गरीब भूखा यहाँ से चल रहा है, अरे ये तो उनका गुंडा तो है नहीं, इसको पकड़ के मारो पहले. तो इवन द वैग्रेंट्स, द वैगाबॉन्ड पीपल वेर पुट एंड किल्ड बाय दिस मॉब विद द फियर कि भाई ये उनका आदमी होगा. स्ट्रीट वायलेंस, all of that, they form ultimately. People come to the street, they start destroying this place, they start destroying one church, then they go destroy some armory. The mob on that day, they go to, on 14th of July, Bastille. Now Bastille is actually a fort. ये किला है. The किला is converted gradually into a jail. That jail is used for arbitrary arrest. It's nearby only. Paris के बहुत नजदीक है. So this fort signifies the arbitrary powers of the king. तो symbol of the monarchical absolutism, monarchical misrule, monarchical corruption. जैसे if you remember I talked about letters the cachet, ये आप खरीद लो, किसी को भी अरेस्ट करवाओ, देयर इज नो ड्यू प्रोसेस ऑफ लॉ, देयर इज नो जुडिशरी प्रॉपरली फंक्शनिंग, राजा के मन में आया डाल दिया, तो दैट बिकेम अ सिंबल ऑफ टॉर्चर एंड उसके अंदर टॉर्चर चलता था, ऑपरेशन. So people got angry. They wanted to destroy Fort of Bastille, but that was not the main reason. The main reason was that the fort contained within it not prisoners anymore. बस मात्र 7 कैदी थे अंदर. It was actually in disuse, but it was used as armory. अंदर बहुत गोला बारूद हथियार था. तो लोगों का बहुत भीड़ आई थी. They wanted to take weapons so that they can attack aristocracy elsewhere. So they came there. The people took to the streets in Paris. When the army finally started parading the streets on 14th of July, there was a great assembly and popular violence. This violence was their response to kings resorting to arms. A monastery at Saint Lazare was looted, gun shops and arsenals were looted, and then they were marching towards the Bastille fort, which was now a prison. Although there were only 7 prisoners at that time, it was the symbol of the absolutist character of the government. The aim was not to free prisoners when they were very few, but the problem was that they wanted to take the arms and ammunition stored there. Ultimately, वहाँ पे जाकर उन्होंने पूरा जमाव कर दिया. Firing started. Couple of people died, and they looted the Bastille. गिर गया. It is one of the most significant events in history of French Revolution. So much so, उसको तब से लेके आज तक every year it is celebrated. Tanish sir, every year it is celebrated. Recently, our Prime Minister went there. Indian Army's contingent went there. This is the first recognized event of the population of public. It is the beginning of democracy, not middle class, the common people. It is the beginning, it is not the end. Democracy is not yet achieved. It will be achieved in the 20th century. शुरुआत यहाँ से होती है. That's why I thought yesterday अगर हम इसकी बात करते अच्छा होता, कल का दिन शुभ था. Anyway, significance, the fall of Bastille had a tremendous impact on the attitude of the people. The public had drawn the first blood. पहला खून हुआ था रास्ते पे. It marked the success of armed uprising. The king was obliged to accept this as a revolution. It symbolized the decline of autocratic nature of the monarchy. All press censorship was lifted. It was the emblem of the old regime, and its fall signified the fall of ancient regime. In the countryside, it gave a hint, violence शुरुआत. यहाँ से अब next phase आती है peasant rebellion in every province, in every town of entire France. ये बस पेरिस में हुआ था. अब हर गांव-गांव में होगा. For next couple of months, what we have is great fear. So the fall of Bastille also had its impact on the countryside in provinces where peasants had been greatly influenced by rumors. And rumors क्या थे इस समय कि भाई ये wandering लोग जो होंगे, the people are actually जो भिखारी लोग हैं यहाँ से वहाँ जाते हैं, ट्राइबल लोग होते हैं, एक गांव से दूसरे गांव जाते हैं, ये लोग एक्चुअली बाहर के लोग हैं, ये राजा ने भेजे हमें परेशान करने के लिए, इनको खत्म कर दो पहले. ऐसे कोई दिखेगा तो एकदम गांव पूरा एकदम उड़ जाता था. And they got weapons gradually, and they started attacking the chateaus, bungalows and कोठिया of जमींदार. And when they used to attack it, वहाँ पे जाके जो वही खाता था उसको पहले जला देंगे. वही खाता would have the notes कि हमसे कर्जा कितना लिया था, हमने कर्जा कितना लिया था, कितना लेना है. तो all the manorialism, all the seigneurial dues are maintained on वही खाता, उसको पहले जलाओ. तो हर शहर में वहाँ पे हमले होना शुरू हो. So in the provinces, there was a whole series of peasant uprising against the lords. The nobles and the bourgeois now took to fight. अब middle class भी घबरा गया. भाई ऐसे तो you are destroying all the property. तो हमारे गांव का क्या होगा? हमारी भी छोटी कोठी बनी हुई है बगल में. Their attack was on manorial rights. They attacked the manor houses, destroyed whatever document there had been. The king now had no option but to allow National Assembly to properly meet and draft a new constitution and decide the fate of France. The king retired to Versailles. अब राजा ने कहा मैं आर्मी वापस बुला लेता हूँ, कुछ नहीं होना जाना. थर्ड स्टेट हैज बिकम नेशनल असेंबली. आई हैव टू एक्सेप्ट, लेट देम फंक्शन. मैं अपना आराम करूंगा जाके. दैट इज द फोर्थ स्टेज इन एंटायर फ्रांस. हैव यू अंडरस्टूड व्हाट वाज द फर्स्ट स्टेज, व्हाट इट लेड टू? स्टेट्स जनरल. सेकंड स्टेज, bourgeois revolution. What it led to? So conversion of state general into national constituent assembly, and then its stability was not there. It was very precarious. It could have been trampled by the king, but then came people in city and peasants in the villages. Third and fourth, and this third and fourth ensured the success of the second one. Okay. Success and stability. So the second revolution, which created the assembly, now could function properly for next couple of years. समझ गए? Clarity है? Now starts the work of the Constituent Assembly. अब असेंबली तो बना दिया आपने, बना के किया क्या उसका? So we have to look at the functioning of the National Constituent Assembly one by one. बहुत कड़वी हो गई है. Do you have any query? No query. I always have this lingering doubt कि either मैं बहुत अच्छा पढ़ा तो या कोई इंटरेस्टेड है नहीं. बताओ क्वेरी क्यों नहीं आती है? जैसे आपकी क्वेरी थी वो कल देख लेंगे क्योंकि वो कल के टॉपिक के साथ जुड़ी हुई है. तो वन शुड बी ऑलवेज इंक्विजिटिव. ठीक है, शायद कभी हो तो बता देना. तो नाउ वर्क ऑफ द नेशनल कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली फ्रॉम 89 to 91. यहाँ पे you get a few important events. The first event is the end of feudalism. August 4th. The second event is Dr. Mac, 26th of August. What is the third one? बताइए. Yes. Judicial plus admin reorganization. Fourth event, economic restructuring. Fifth event is secularization. And we have all of this coming together into constitution. So we have to look at all these 6 events. So this is the entire work of the Constituent Assembly. It happens in 1789 here. और यहाँ पे कौन सा ईयर है? 1791, right? Not 92, 91 or 92, 91. So since 1891 ये लगभग 2 साल की कहानी है. So the assembly continued to meet at regular interval for 2 continuous years. In those 2 continuous years, all these things were done one after another. But the story doesn't end there. Parallelly, in society, in politics, other things are going simultaneously. जो कहानी हम ज़्यादा नहीं पढ़ते, बट उसमें 2 चीज़ें हमारे लिए जरूरी है. इसमें से एक चीज़ है मोनार्की का क्या हो रहा है साथ ही साथ. मोनार्की इज नॉट सिटिंग साइलेंट. They try to run away, they try to come back, they try to collaborate with other monarchies outside. The relationship of France with other nations get complicated and the war starts. The first coalition, the European war. So during all these things happening, ultimately it leads to beginning of war, revolutionary war. तो ये कहानी साथ साथ चलती है parallelly. But we are focused more on this. Now, out of these 6 events, possibility of questions कहाँ से बनते हैं? One possibility is a direct question specifically on only 4th of August, night of 4th of August. 2-4 comments हैं, कोर्ट से, they are very famous, सवाल आते हैं वहाँ से. Second possibility is on Doromac or Dr. Mac, Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. It's like Bill of Rights or Fundamental Rights. उसके बारे में we have to go and analyze its significance. Then the third possibility is about the Constitution itself. And the fourth possibility is a collective question on its analysis or nature, especially to what extent it was able to change economy, or to what extent it was the expression of middle class ethos. ये वाले क्वेश्चन जो आते हैं उसमें यू टेक एग्जांपल्स फ्रॉम स्टार्ट टू एंड एंड यू शो कि मिडिल क्लास कितना था, रेडिकल कितना कम था, उस तक की बात यहाँ पे हो. आफ्टर दिस एवरीथिंग इज डन, व्हाट यू हैव इज राजा जो था, द किंग वुड हैव मेड यहाँ पे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोनार्क. ये तो पूरा गेम था. There should be constitution to control the powers of the king, but not to remove the king. Raja chahiye. The king is important. King is central. And in this constitution, it's not that king is powerless. King continues to be powerful even in the constitution. But Raja ko akal nahi hai. He commits lots more mistake ultimately, and the war gets even more brutal. So people get angry. Ultimately, Raja ka sar tan se juda. So what happens is this constitution actually creates legislative assembly. कि हमने अब सब कुछ हो गया है, let us call elections, they get form parliament, and this parliament will function with the king. But the things go awry, things go wrong, everybody gets angry, and the king is gone. And then once the king is gone, this constitution cannot function. The constitution to function requires king to be there. So you have a new constitution. That is the second phase. But second phase हम बाद में देखेंगे. But ये कहानी है पूरी. ठीक है? We have to look at these 6 events one by one. There is a minor event in between, Women's March. तो उसको भी हम थोड़ा देख लेंगे. But that is historically significant. UPSC point of view say that is not significant. So let us come to the first event, end of the feudalism on the night of 4th of August. अब होता क्या है? 4 अगस्त की रात को सेशन चल रहा है. Everybody suddenly gets very emotional. There is a person whose name is Mirabeau. He comes and says, although I am an aristocrat, I renounce all my privileges. मैंने मेरे सारे privilege छोड़ दिए, सबको मैंने तर्पण कर दिया. ठीक है? Then comes another person. His name is Viscount de Noailles. नाम क्या जरूरी नहीं है. He proposes a resolution. Let us pass as an assembly that all the feudal lords and all the nobility and churches would not have any प्रिविलेज. सब खत्म कर देंगे आज रात में. तो फॉर एंटायर रात में एक के बाद एक एरिस्टोक्रेट्स आता है, मिडिल क्लास आता है, भाषण के ऊपर भाषण, एकदम बढ़िया से सब माहौल बना हुआ है. इन द मॉर्निंग दे हैव पास्ड फ्यू आर्टिकल्स, फ्यू क्लॉजेस, फ्यू रेजोल्यूशंस कि भाई फेडरलिज्म इज डिस्ट्रॉयड. कितने महान लोग. एंड द ट्रेडिशन ऑफ लास्ट 1000 years इज डिस्ट्रॉयड इन वन सिंगल नाइट. टू व्हाट एक्सटेंट इट इज ट्रू, to what extent it is effective, to what extent it was really voluntary. तो ये सारे डिबेट आ जाते हैं. So let us look at the event first and then the analysis afterwards. So on the night of the 4th of August in 1789, a set of 19 articles were passed by the National Constituent Assembly which abolished feudalism in France and ended the tax exemptions as well as privileges of the upper classes. Thus the institutions and practices of old regime were wiped out. So what are these things which are wiped out? Firstly, the principle of equality was declared as the basis of the state and society. So fiscal equality है, मतलब fiscal immunity of the two classes is gone. You will also have to pay taxes. जो कोशिश राजा खुद कर रहा था, since Turgot and Necker and Colin Briand, अब जाके हो गई finally. Everybody will have to pay tax. Equality of rights, freedom from arbitrary arrest, and freedom from expression. ये सब कहाँ से आते हैं? Why these things are required? Because middle class, and because the middle class is now guided by the grievances of people as per cahiers लेके आए. Cahiers give an idea जनता क्या चाहती है. Subject of the king were transformed into citizens of France. Subject of the king was transformed into citizens of France. That is the fundamental idea. The seigneurial rights and manorialism was abolished. So hunting, gifts, corvée मतलब बेगार, the second estate, the tithe gathered by the first estate, all of these was completely abolished. So you don't have to pay extra taxes. The peasants who were oppressed, they hated all these taxes. Now all these taxes are gone. मतलब feudalism खत्म कर दिया. Guilds were destroyed. Guilds controlled the production. They had monopoly over it. So economic activity was thrown open to everybody. Everybody can take participation in economic activity. And the old system of judiciary founded in 13 regional parliaments was also abolished. The parliaments are also gone. State general is also gone. So feudal institutions are gone. Not only feudal taxes and feudal economic structure, also the feudal institutions are abolished. What is not abolished is monarchy. वो तो चलेगी. It is constitutional monarchy. Thus, both economic and social privileges were abolished. This was the middle class triumph. These resolutions destroyed the old France and gave birth to a new France. That is why it is commented that, अब ये सवाल आते हैं आपके, these are the statements for the questions. On the 4th of August 1989, the France mentioned in history disappeared and a new democratic France emerged. On the night of 4th of August, the old France went to bed, but next morning a new France woke up. 14th of July ended the political regime of Bourbon. Bourbon dynasty का नाम था. What happened on 14th of July? Fall of Bastille. Fall of Bastille. So 14th of July ended the political regime of the Bourbons, while the decrees of the night of 4th of August ended the social and administrative base of the regime. The revolution went through the stages, started by the aristocracy, but finally the aristocracy was to find a common grave, as it were, with the monarchy. शुरुआत करी थी एरिस्टोक्रेट्स ने, सबसे पहले उनको खत्म कर दिया गया. मोनार्की अभी भी चल रही है. ठीक है. तो हाँ, नाउ द टैक्स विल गो टू द सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट, मतलब गवर्नमेंट के पास जाएंगे. Constitutional Assembly is still drafting everything. It will change administration. It will bring new currency also. Everything will change now. They whole and soul start to change everything. Now, as I said, the question is about its significance. अगर ये सवाल आता है, the France mentioned in the history disappeared and a new democratic France emerged the next morning. Illustrate, exemplify, elucidate, explain. तो बड़ा आसान. You talk of the old regime, ancient regime, 3 state and all these feudal dues, etc. Then talk of the 4 phases very quickly and then focus on the 4th of August. Night में क्या हुआ, हर एक ने अपने अपने अधिकार छोड़ दिए and then the new France emerged. But if the question is critically analyzed, examined, then you have to take a critical viewpoint. You talk of limitations also. So here I have to give you certain historiography. So let us try to do that. एक्सप्लेन वाला क्वेश्चन तो बड़ा आसान है, क्रिटिकल वाला क्वेश्चन इज थोड़ा सा क्रिटिकल. सो आई विल टेल यू देयर आर कपल ऑफ इंपॉर्टेंट व्यू पॉइंट्स. फर्स्ट व्यू पॉइंट इज ट्रेडिशनल व्यू पॉइंट. व्हाट इज द ट्रेडिशनल व्यू पॉइंट? हिस्टोरियंस कौन होंगे यहाँ पे? 19th सेंचुरी टोकोविले, गुइजॉट, मिशेले, नाम सुने आपने? टोकोविले सुना होगा आपने, बताया था मैंने टोकोविले. तो लेट मी राइट दोस नेम्स फर्स्ट. I don't know French spellings, आप देख लेना एक बार. These are the 19th century traditional historians who formed the main opinions, जो हम आज भी बहुत मानते हैं, कई हद तक मानते हैं. But then you have second piece, the people who came in the 20th century, mid of 20th century, Marxists. यहाँ पे the most famous is Lefebvre, Georges Lefebvre. No, Lefebvre is in 20th century. Abhi in the mid 20th century he is there. He is quite modern. Marx is 19th century. Rather this Tocqueville, Michelet, etc. They are contemporary of Karl Marx in 19th century. And then you have new historians also. Let us call them revisionist. There are lots of them. Simon Schama is there. You have, let us take one, Alfred Coban. Sobol bhi hai. But I think this one name is enough. We have to see what are their viewpoints. Take the traditional one first. What would our traditionalists say about this night of 4th of August? We have to go with what we have just seen. It's a step towards, important step towards dismantling of feudalism. So it's a very significant event. It's very effective event. It is taken voluntarily by middle class and upper class. It changed everything. Even the, when important point I forgot to mention is that when the feudalism is abolished, उसके साथ साथ और एक चीज abolish होती है, and that is serfdom. Now a peasant is no more tied to the land; he can migrate anywhere. So a nation of free peasants emerge. It's an important, it's a fundamental thing. We have a nation of free peasants emerging. The feudal system is destroyed. It's a creation of a just and equitable society. सर आप नोट्स क्यों नहीं ले रहे हो? I will not dictate things. ठीक है, आपको रनिंग नोट्स कई बार लेते रहने पड़ेंगे. We are not in school anymore. Whatever you find important, please keep noting down. या फिर आपको दोबारा वीडियो देखना पड़ेगा कई बार. So it was a creation of just and equitable. मतलब क्या होता है ना? When I talk in the flow, I may tell some important points which are not there on the board. कभी कभी आपको पॉइंट, if you find anything important, note it down. It's a skill. Running notes is a skill. वो आनी चाहिए. Because I think Vishal sir is now giving you a good amount of dictation. So the skill that is required to be inculcated कि आपको लिखना आना चाहिए, right? अच्छी लैंग्वेज आनी चाहिए. So that वो बड़ा जो बोझ है, वो he is carrying that बोझ. तो मैं थोड़ा फ्री होके आपको बिना डिक्टेशन का काम चला रहा हूँ. ठीक है, if I enter into that, then I will also start dictating everything. But then other side, you should learn how to take running notes. आप सीखोगे नहीं, आपको वो भी आना चाहिए, जरूरी स्किल है जिंदगी. ठीक है, इसलिए सुबह सुबह आँख नहीं बंद करूँगा. नहीं पता, कॉफी पीना शुरू कर दो. Anyway, so France, in France, the feudalism was destroyed and a just and equitable society emerged. So it is not only important achievement, the effect, voluntary, effective, lasting impact. तो ये हो गए आर्ग्यूमेंट्स, फैक्ट्स यू ऑलरेडी नो. ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट चीज थी. एंड wherever afterwards French army went, because I said the continental war will start in a couple of years. वहाँ पे in Central Europe, in Russia, there was feudalism continuing. जहाँ जहाँ फ्रेंच आर्मी गई वहाँ वहाँ उन्होंने वहाँ के भी feudal structure destroy कर दिए. But that was also, when you say it is significant, event significance is not only domestic to France, it is international of scale. Impact of French Revolution की बात जब करेंगे, the legacy of French Revolution, destruction of feudalism is a very important legacy of French Revolution. That is one point. Now the Marxist would comment say, ये क्या बात कर रहे हो आप? Marx would have a different viewpoint. It would say that देखो दो बातें हैं. Was it really voluntary? Comes down. It was not voluntary. It was under duress. मिडिल क्लास की इच्छा होती, मिडिल क्लास तो छोड़ो, अपर क्लास जो है वॉलंटरली सब अपनी अधिकार छोड़े जा रहा है. If they wanted, they would not have done that. They have done. It is done only under pressure. जब फॉल ऑफ बास्टिल होता है, ग्रेट फियर जुलाई एंड अगस्त मंथ में पूरे देश में चल रहा है. इट इज अंडर द प्रेशर ऑफ दैट. The middle class gets afraid that now the violence is on the streets. The lower class is driving the revolution, and they would not stop anywhere. They would not only destroy the chateaus of the aristocrats, they would destroy the private property also. इनको रोको. कैसे रोकोगे? पहले इनके डिमांड्स कुछ सेटिस्फाई करो. It was not voluntary, but pressure from below acted upon them. Pressure from below. That is the first argument. And secondly, and more importantly, it was not radical. Abolition of feudalism was not radical, but it was all middle class. Why? Because private property was not abolished. You have abolished everything else, taxes, old kind of taxes, old kind of this, old kind of that, but जहाँ पे मिडिल क्लास का इंटरेस्ट आता है वो आपने छोड़ा नहीं, बल्कि उसको और पुख्ता कर दिया. So it is not radical. The actual demand of the lower classes of equitable distribution of resources is not satisfied. Middle class ने अपनी चमड़ी बचा ली. So that is the point. So it is not as radical and therefore it is not as significant. It is not involuntary. अब ये बात आती है मार्क्सिस्ट लोगों की. The second point is revisionist. Third point rather. What would a revisionist say? A revisionist would say उनका कुछ अलग ही चलता रहता है. To be very honest, they would say it is not significant because of two things. Firstly, already destroyed in provinces. Therefore, fate accomplished and not effective till 1793. What they are saying, this is not something significant event because ये सारे dues, seigneurial dues, manorialism, etc. was already physically exterminated in many provinces by the people. It accompli है, आप बस ऊपर इसमें क्या बड़ा उदारता आपकी है, जो हो चुका है उसको आप बस मान रहे हो. You are not doing anything new, you are not doing it voluntarily, it is actually done by the people in the provinces already. आप बस उसको ठप्पा लगा रहे हो. So it is not that significant event because significance has already taken place by the people. And secondly, it is not actually completely implemented even afterwards. जैसे इंडिया में देखो, after 47, 1950, we have constitution, we go for land reforms. पंडित नेहरू land reforms start होते चलते हैं, almost fail होते सारे. Almost every other land reform in India is a failure because of the opposition by the जमींदार class. वो सक्सेसफुल कैसे होता है? Only with brute force ultimately. So ultimately in the second phase of revolution, when you have a reign of terror and a huge amount of violence, at that time the feudalism is completely destroyed. इस समय नहीं. तो revisionist भी बोलता है कि it is all myth making by the middle class about themselves. बाद में जाके खुद का जो गाना गाते हम कितने बढ़िया थे, हमने ये किया, उस myth making में they have created a myth of the night of 4th of August. उसमें कुछ दम ही नहीं है, बस खुद के ढोल बजा रहे हो आप मिडिल क्लास. आप खुद लिखते हो, आप खुद छापते हो, आपने छाप दिया 4th of August. That is the point. समझ में आ रहा है? So where we stand, we don't go with the revisionist view completely, but in the we have to understand that significance of event to have. Now in history it is generally so that event is not single time event. There is something before it, something after it, but you have to choose some emblem. कोई एक आप symbol लेते हो, तो 4th of August actually symbolic importance. The process उसके पहले शुरू हुई और बाद में खत्म हुई. The process started before 4th of August, ended after 4th of August, but it is a symbolic importance that we assign to 4th of August. So overall significance cannot be denied at all. But was it only because of one single night? तो वो तो नहीं है. ठीक है. And secondly, was it not voluntary? We don't need to worry about involuntary है कि नहीं, ये काम हुआ कि नहीं हुआ. Intention से हमें क्या लेना देना. And thirdly, middle class, yes, that we have to agree. Middle class continued to have its complete stamp on the nature of revolution till the end of the first phase. It is only after the assassination or the execution of the king you have the lower class becoming prominent. So this is the historiographical analysis of the night of 4th of August. Now, if the question is on critical analysis, I think you will be able to answer. लिख पाएंगे? I have given you conclusion also. चलो, let us move on to the next. Now, this class equation between middle class and lower class is very important. It is also seen in America. In American Revolution also, the lower class had started to rise. But then there happened Boston Massacre, in which either 3 or 5 people were killed. And then the name of patriotism succumbed into itself all this economic radicalism. And we have seen the document as per Charles Beard also. वहाँ भी middle class की छाप पूरी थी. In case of France, there is some difference. Although here also the first phase is middle class phase. Middle class is not as powerful as in the case of America. Here middle class is indebted to the lower class, because of lower class muscle power only they could do everything. So they feel obligated to do something about the lower class. के कुछ डिमांड फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन में एक्सेप्ट होते हैं जो अमेरिका में नहीं हुए रिवॉल्यूशन में. इसीलिए फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन इज मोर रेडिकल एंड मोर इम्पोर्टेंट दैन अमेरिकन रिवॉल्यूशन. यहाँ पे जनता की बात ज़्यादा पहली बार होती है, फ्रांस में नहीं, अमेरिका में नहीं होती. इट इज प्राइमरली मिडिल क्लास. देन वी गो टू द नेक्स्ट पार्ट. ये आपने लिख लिया? Replacing the ancient regime with modern system. You have Declaration of Rights of Men and Citizens. Now on the 26th of August in the same month, same August, you have Dr. Mack. Dr. Mack. याद रखने के लिए आसान है. डॉक्टर मैक. इतना पूरा नाम कौन बोलेगा बार बार? डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ राइट्स ऑफ मेन एंड सिटीजन. डॉक्टर मैक या डोरो मैक, जो बोलना चाहे बोलो. So it was a death warrant of the old regime as per Lefebvre. So what was this? Nothing but the fundamental rights. It is nothing but Bill of Rights. As I said, in the case of American Revolution, the Constitution was drafted first, and only at the time of ratification, the Bill of Rights was afterwards agreed to, and then after its promulgation, it was made a part of the Constitution as per Amendment 1 to Amendment 10. First 10 amendments are called as Bill of Rights. But यहाँ पे बात उल्टी है. यहाँ पे you don't even have Constitution, but before that you have Declaration of Rights. पहले अधिकार की बात करेंगे. हक पहले बताओ, हमारे हक क्या है. ठीक है. So it is therefore more radical in every sense. It consisted of 17 articles and served as the preamble to the French Constitution of 1791, which was about to come. It was drafted by Abbesius and Lafayette in consultation with Jefferson. Now, Lafayette himself was the champion of liberty. He was originally French but went to America to participate in the American War of Independence. Now, at this point of time, America was already free, and Lafayette had come back to France as American ambassador. So, and then he participated here, and he drafted this declaration with the active guidance of Jefferson. Jefferson कौन है? Jefferson is the one who drafted American Declaration. The same आदमी का input लेके ये बना हुआ declaration. Although the year here is 1789, the Bill of Rights is yet to be completely passed. तो अमेरिका के Bill of Rights भी अभी बन रही इसी समय की बात है. साथ चल रहा है लगभग. ठीक है. Now it was a noble document on which the French Revolution and the working of the Constitution were to be based. It was clearly inspired by Enlightenment age principles. So when we discuss that question, what was the impact of Enlightenment on French Revolution? It is clearly seen in this document. Lots of ideas of Enlightenment are visible. Let us look at what are the rights they are talking about, and you identify which are the Enlightenment ideas there. A number of rights were enshrined in this declaration. Right to life, liberty, property कहाँ से आता है? Locke. Then every person is born with certain natural rights. It is the duty of the state to protect these rights of citizens. Again, this is John Locke speaking. Then you go to liberty. Every citizen is free to practice and propagate any religion within the limits prescribed by the law. It is who? Voltaire. Voltaire talks a lot about right to religion. Freedom from arbitrary arrest. An individual must be safeguarded against arbitrary police or judicial action. No person shall be accused, arrested, or imprisoned except in accordance with the law. Freedom of expression and press. This is all Montesquieu and Voltaire together every time. Right to own property. Oh, this is very interesting. Described as sacred, inalienable, and inviolable. ये तीन terms use किए हैं in the declaration itself. Declaration is the handiwork of middle class. Enlightenment also is the middle class charter. Right to property किसको चाहिए? Middle class को चाहिए. जिसके पास ऑलरेडी कुछ है नहीं, ना जमीन ना खाने के लिए, उसको क्या पड़ी है, वो बोलेगा सब डिस्ट्रीब्यूट कर दो. इट इज ओनली मिडिल क्लास विच इज सो मच कि मैंने उसको होती प्रॉपर्टी कम है, ही इज नॉट वेरी रिच, तो थोड़ी है रहे बनी रहे मेरे पास, तो ही बिकम्स कंजर्वेटिव थोड़ा सा. एंड व्हेन यू से रेडिकल इट मीन्स सब तबाह कर दो. तो इक्वालिटी बिफोर द लॉ, right to acquire government ranks in accordance with their merits. So you have meritocracy. This again goes against the feudal idea. If you are born in certain family, only then you can go to certain office. Now अगर ताकत है ऊपर जाओ. कौन जाता है ऊपर? Napoleon Bonaparte. He is not a very high noble. He comes from an average background. He comes from noble family which was originally noble but no more powerful. But he could rise from the very bottom to very top. 4-5 साल के अंदर, 4-5 साल के, because he has merit and talent. So Napoleon was a child of revolution. How do we know that? Because the principle of meritocracy, by demolishing feudalism, demolishing estates, was accepted by the revolution. That is why he could rise in the hierarchy and become top. Napoleon was child of revolution in one sense. Separation of powers, again you have Montesquieu here. Law to be enacted by elected assembly. So you have popular sovereignty and general will. What do you have here? Rousseau speaking. Rousseau is the main spirit behind the declaration. Dr. Mack. Sovereignty to reside in the nation. So all these last 4 points are generally points of Rousseau. You have Jules Michel, 19th century old traditional historian. Jules Michel, he has said it was the credo of the new age. This declaration was credo of the new age. Now we have to analyze declaration also. A question could be expected specifically on declaration. As long as it is a simple question in the form of explain, elucidate, exemplify, illustrate, you have the facts here, I have no problem. You can write answer very well. But if the question is of analyze, critically analyze, comment upon, to what extent, वो वाले जो क्वेश्चंस आते हैं उसमें you have to be able to talk about positive and limitations both of the declaration. So we go to the next part. An entire new basis was created for the restructuring of French politically, legally and constitutionally. The declaration served as an affirmation of the core values of French Revolution and had a major impact on the development of liberty and democracy in Europe and across the world. Even our revolution, in our preamble you see the echoes of the French declaration. So let us go for analytical perspective. I will go less into the historians' opinions here. मैं आपको कितने नाम दूँ? But if you want to write positive things, go to the 3 traditional historians that I have given: Jules Michel, Guizot, and Tocqueville. If you want to talk about the negative things from the class analysis perspective, use Lefebvre. If you want to talk of revisionists, you have Coburn, you have Sobol, you have Skama, many other people. So, positive side, it was based on the Enlightenment ideas getting manifested, general will, popular sovereignty. Some essential rights of the citizens such as rule of law, right to property, right to safety from arbitrary, etc. So rights are quite progressive, quite positive. It reflected the principles which became the basis of the future government of France, and the future constitutions that came tried to conform with the spirit of declaration. It became Charter of Freedom for liberals across the 19th century in 1789, in 1820, in 1830, in 1848, in 1871. Again and again, there is some kind of revolt, some kind of rebellion. The values that I talked about are these values across Europe and for the whole humanity. But positives are very easy to talk about. इसकी आप प्रशंसा जितनी चाहे करो, कोई बड़ी बात है नहीं. The question comes with the limitations and analytical perspective. Let us try to look at the limitations. The first thing is that it mostly favored middle class. So not all the rights were given. Some rights were withheld. For example, the enshrined rights reflected the interest of middle class. That's why the right to property, freedom of thought and expression, freedom of religion, etc. were accepted, but not right to work, right to assembly, right to food. जो आज के दिन में इंडिया में भी they are put into DPSP more than कुछ of some of them are now in fundamental rights, yes, but originally they were not part of fundamental rights because they are rights of the lower class and community. धीरे 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 जैसे डेमोक्रेसी और बढ़ती है, वेलफेयर स्टेट और बढ़ता है, रेडिकलिज्म और बढ़ता है, these rights which are DPSP they enter into fundamental rights, right? And these right to food, right to work किसके होते हैं? लोअर क्लास के होते हैं, वो यहाँ पे थे ही नहीं. राइट टू असेंबली ऑल्सो यूनियन बाजी करके वरना अलाउड नहीं करेंगे हम. So there was no right to assembly as well. So which could have benefited a lower class. So it was not there. The declaration was indeed a watershed moment in the history of human rights, furthering the scope of than most of the similar documents in the past. Yet at the same time there was limitation. First limitation, apart from not all rights were given, is that it was property dependent. So only 25% people paid the taxes and only they got all the rights. If you don't pay taxes, if you don't have enough property, you don't have all the rights. So it is for middle class, by the middle class, of the middle class. Yes. The second thing, women. Women were not given rights. We were frustrated. Frustration that women's rights were not doctrines of rights of man and citizen. There is a woman in the name. Woman is not there. They were not given property rights. में नहीं थे ना voting rights उनके पास. Voting rights बाद में आते तब भी नहीं थे. So we have a French woman, Olympe de Gouges, to pen the Declaration of Rights of Women and the Female Citizen. उसने गुस्से में आके लिख दिया. In the same year 1791, in a couple of years afterwards, stating explicitly women's equality with men, she sought to expose the failure of the revolution to live up to the promises of equality. She was actually herself a lower class woman, daughter of a butcher, एक कसाई की बेटी थी वो, and she wrote it 2 साल बाद कि भाई आप बात करते इक्वालिटी की, कहाँ है इक्वालिटी. The second issue is, second woman very famous is the English journalist who came to visit Paris at that time. Her name is Mary Wollstonecraft. She actually has a very opposite view of it. वो कहती है equality substantively actually also is equality of women because we have destroyed the old regime, the ancient regime. She has interestingly compared the condition of women with the condition of aristocracy. Both of them don't have education, both of them don't have power, and therefore both of them are venal and corrupt and resort to bad means. Now the aristocracy is abolished, equality is brought, तो औरतों को अब एजुकेशन मिलेगा, पावर भी मिलेगी, डोंट वरी. So she is talking of it from the positive viewpoint, but she is analyzing things from feminist lens. That is important. So she witnessed the revolution firsthand by going to Paris. She defended the quote right of man in 1791 book, and in 1792 she published a vindication of the rights of women also. Second point, apart from the middle class point, lower class, proper poor wala point, woman wala point, we also have one more point, that is it failed to end the slavery. France was a slave owning state. Equality की बात करते हो, कहाँ equality है? Across the French colonies you have slavery, but nonetheless we have to talk of a little positive here also. The declaration did not end slavery by itself, but it created expectations and hopes and aspirations which traveled to the colonies, and then colonies gradually destroyed slavery in next couple of generations. The first important impact you see in Haiti or San Domingo. We have in 1820s Haitian revolt, the first slave rebellion of modern times. The France is forced to accept the freedom of slave. यहाँ चिंगारी पड़ती है, आग बाद में लगती है. But itself explicitly at that time it did not abolish slavery. Then workers, when inspired workers started to form their associations, they were prohibited to do so. So the declaration was more abstract than real for the lower class. Because of all these limitations, it appears that the Declaration of Rights was drawing inspiration more from the past than from the future. Future में जो बदलाव की आहट है, वो इसमें सुनाई नहीं देती. It is more actually rehashing of what is already there in American Declaration, in British Bill of Rights, in Magna Carta. Is it true? Well, it is not. This can also be a separate question, that Dr. Mack derives its ideas more from the past than from the future, critically analyze. In the first half, more from the past, we talk about both positives and negatives. दोनों पास के आए हैं, but हम बोलते हैं फ्यूचर का नहीं है, ये बात भी नहीं है. Lots of things in this document were new and for the first time inspired by enlightenment, like popular sovereignty, etc. They could not be found earlier. तो फ्यूचर भी है. But yes, it is not completely futuristic, because the French society undergoes industrial revolution very soon, and then workers की बात आती है, वो आप satisfy नहीं है, but गूंज है उसके यहाँ. ठीक है. So conclusion, despite its shortcomings, it was one of the most significant and enduring achievements of the French Revolution. Even the limited aims of the farmers of the frame of the declaration, especially Article 1, extended logically to mean political and even social democracy. It was the credo of the New Age by Jules Michel. So New Age की बात हो रही है, future की बात हो रही है. It is about future. It is not as futuristic as you want it to be, but it is not only based on past also. ये अपना फंडा है. Is it clear? आगे चले. Let me see if you have any doubt and queries, comments. How did it transition from popular to peasant revolution? It's very simple. Actually, it is the same thing in one way. The difference is twofold. The popular is only in the context of Paris city and not rest of France. शहर के जो mob है, Parisian mob, only for that we use the term popular. Peasant हम use तब करते हैं when we discuss about entire France, in all the provinces, in villages and towns everywhere. तो geographic difference है and class difference भी है. Popular में generally worker class है, शहर के अंदर peasants कम है. But in the peasant it is poor again, but it is peasant class. And the popular revolution is actually the beginning of, है तो continuity ही, starts in July, continues in the month of August of 1789. But शुरुआत के फेज को हमने अलग नाम दिया है क्योंकि वो शहर में है, that's all. As the states were no more, what is meant by fiscal equality? तो the fiscal equality का मतलब है कि now you come from any origin, सबके लिए एक टैक्स रहेगा. That's simple. ठीक है. I could see two Shaunak Banerjees here. Did the Shagots had any role to play in the revolution? Shaunak, I don't know. I really don't know. I'll find out. Let us come to one event which is historically quite significant, but from the exam viewpoint not very significant. तो उसको हम जल्दी से देख लेंगे. While all the things are happening in the assembly, what is happening in the public domain is one of these. जनता gets impatient. 1789 में रिवॉल्यूशन हुई है. Now it is 4 or 5 months, जुलाई, अगस्त, सितंबर, अक्टूबर, 4-5 महीने हो गए. कुछ हुआ कि नहीं अभी तक? खाना सस्ता हुआ? नहीं हुआ. Inflation down? Not down. Is there food available? No. Scarcity still goes on. So people are angry. They are impatient. So the king refused to sanction the August decrees and declaration both. So अगस्त के महीने में दोनों चीजें हुई थी, 4 अगस्त की 26 अगस्त की. बोथ ऑफ देम वेर नॉट एक्सेप्टेड बाय राजा. बैठा है वर्साई के पैलेस में, बोलता है भाड़ में जाओ, नहीं मानता. So people are angry. At the same time, there was still a fear and anxiety among the people that the king and the aristocrats were continuing their conspiracy to defeat the revolution. आप क्योंकि अभी तक देर नॉट गवर्नमेंट बना नहीं है ना, ताकत है अभी उनके पास, बस 600 लोग बात कर रहे हैं. So it can be trampled any time. There is a connection of these people with army. They control the army. They have also the connection with outside people. तो क्या हो सकता है? At the same time, you have women getting impatient, women getting angry क्योंकि खाना सस्ता है नहीं. वहाँ पे एक और रूमर चलती है कि when there is no food in the market, खबर ऐसे आती है कि वर्सा के पैलेस में हॉल्स भर भर के गोदाम में खाना पड़ा हुआ है, ग्रेन. एंड पीपल ऑल्सो फील वेरी फ्रस्ट्रेटेड कि भाई राजा ही है जो हमारी समस्या सॉल्व कर सकता है. ये लोग, इनसे कुछ हो नहीं, 4-5 महीने हो गए, कुछ हो नहीं रहा, खाना नहीं मिल रहा. तो द वुमेन folk in the city of Paris ultimately become a mob. They have their own leader. They start marching. 7,000 women ultimately हाथ में हथियार लेके, इसके हाथ में भाला है, तलवार है, चाकू है, कुछ भी है, लेकिन 7,000 का मॉब आता है वर्षा की तरफ कि राजा चाहिए हमें. तो राजा की फट जाती है. नो यू नेवर नो, 7,000 पीजेंट वुमन जो अंत में जाके उनको वो काम करती है खेत में मजदूर की तरह, तो ताकत भी है, हथियार चलाना आता है. एंड यू आर एंग्री एंड यू आर हंग्री बोथ, एंड यू आर अटैकिंग, यू आर कमिंग टुवर्ड्स मी. दे कम विथ अ स्लोगन. वो सेंटेंस मेरे पास में लिखा हुआ है. द स्लोगन इज दैट दे से वी आर गोइंग टू वर्साई फॉर द बेकर्स वाइफ एंड द बेकर्स बॉय. मतलब जो खाना देने वाला जो है अन्नदाता, उसकी पत्नी, उसका बेटा हमें वो चाहिए. बिकॉज दे थिंक द किंग कैन सॉल्व ऑल द प्रॉब्लम्स, कर सॉल्व, वरना. तो दिस 7,000 वुमेन वो देयर, दे घेर आउट द वर्साई पैलेस. दे फोर्स द किंग टू कम आउट ऑफ वर्साई, द एंटायर रॉयल फैमिली, एंड ट्रांसफर हिम फ्रॉम वर्साई टू पेरिस इन द हॉल ऑफ टॉयलेट्स. तो आप पेरिस में रहो और हमारे सामने रहो. टू थिंग्स यहाँ पे क्लियर होते हैं. फर्स्टली द सस्पिशन. Are you going to engineer a conspiracy with other people to destroy revolution? If you are in front of our eyes, we can monitor you. You will not do that. आप नजर में सामने रहो, दूर पैलेस में नहीं. The second thing, you are still the king. Give us, आप अन्नदाता हो. Bring some reform. Give us some food. So because of these two things, ultimately, the king's family is shifted from Versailles. तो अब राजा ने रहना कहाँ वो राजा डिसाइड नहीं कर सकता. Where to live, what to do. He is now under the control of the crowd. इतने राजा के दिन बुरे आ गए. So what was the, and there was some violence also while bringing them back towards Paris. कुछ लोगों को मारा गया. Some people who were in the royal circle, although royal family was not harmed, some people in the royal circle were killed. Their body was raped, mutilated, destroyed. किसी के genitals भाले पे रख के वो नाचते नाचते आए थे, सर भाले पे रखा था. तो violent people, it's all violence. It's not an easy thing. But anyway, significance of the event, the march proved that the monarchy was subject to the will of the people. It also gave the revolutionaries confidence in the power of the people over the king. It stripped the king of much of his remaining independence and authority. Now king is completely subjected to whatever the assembly says. Assembly has said August declaration, decrees of 4th of August, declaration of rights of man and citizen. अब मान के, अब मना करके दिखा. राजा रह नहीं सकता अपनी जगह, मना क्या करेगा. Secondly, as a result of the march, the monarchist faction in the assembly effectively lost its significance. Within the assembly also, you had some people who were pro-monarchy. Not everybody is Republican. So those people, उनका voice अब दब गया. राजा की power कम हो गई. So for many scholars, French Revolution was not about high enlightenment ideas, but about primarily economic hardship. So all the events, all of Bastille, then great fear in the provinces, and then women's march. तो जनता जो मसल पावर दे रही है, the middle class is not able to do by anything by itself. हर चीज पे जो कम पड़ता है, मसल पावर जनता से आती है. जनता किस चीज के लिए कर रही है? Not for middle class. जनता is doing it for itself. It is inspired not by idea of Rousseau, but by book. The fundamental reason, therefore, in the French Revolution's beginning and success both is economic. And not the high lofty ideas. तो मिडिल क्लास के आइडियाज है, बट उनके पास क्या ही सत्ता है. So you can use these examples in the discussion on the causes at that time to justify the argument. Louis attempted to work within the framework of his limited powers after the Women's March, but won little support, and he and the royal family remained virtual prisoners in the Tuileries. Then later on, he becomes so desperate, so लगता है कि मुझे मार देंगे या I have to take the power, में he tries to run away. So there is a flight to Varennes. It's a place in France जहाँ से वो भागने, वो कपड़े चेंज करता है. वो कहानी भी इतनी इंटरेस्टिंग है. वो कपड़े पहनता है कॉमन मैन के. अब महाराजा ऑफ फ्रांस हु हैज नेवर बीन अ कॉमन मैन कॉमन के कपड़े पहन के भागने की कोशिश करता है. वहाँ पे कस्टम ड्यूटी वाला एक हवालदार उसे पूछता है, देखता है, अरे लुक्स लाइक अवर राजा. जब हमारा मार्च गया था 88 में, आई हैड सीन हिम फ्रॉम फार अवे, मुझे उसका चेहरा याद थे, तो राजा महाराजा है हमारे, और कुछ भी कहो महाराजा महाराजा है. तो वो हवलदार जो है वो टोपी खोल के सलाम करता है. अब राजा को आ रहे थे, वो भी बोलता है यस. जैसे वैसे करता है, सबको पता है ये राजा है. तो दोबारा लोग आते हैं इसको पकड़ के, चल वापस. बट नाउ हिज अटेम्प्टेड फ्लाइट हैज प्रूवन द सस्पिशन that he is trying to have some conspiracy, trying to connect with outside kings and bring the army and destroy the revolution. तो जो ट्रस्ट था वो पूरा खत्म हो जाता है. ट्रस्ट तो पहले भी नहीं था, पहले रिस्पेक्ट खत्म हो गया, अब ट्रस्ट खत्म हो गया. ठीक है, बट दैट हैपेंस आफ्टर 91, बाद वाली कहानी. नाउ द एरिस्टोक्रेट्स बिगैन टू फ्ली द कंट्री. तो एरिस्टोक्रेट्स भी जो है देश छोड़ के भागना शुरू कर देते हैं. दे आर कॉल्ड एज एमिग्रेज. So all these people who go outside, immigrants. नहीं वो यूरोप में ही जा रहे हैं, बगल वाले देश में, यहाँ वहाँ. ठीक है, so that is about the Women's March. Now come back to the attempts of the assembly. Here we have to look at 4 things: administrative, judicial, economic, secular and constitution. It's a very small part. अब देख लेते हैं. Firstly, France used to have a very complicated structure of administration. Not all provinces were equal. Not all provinces had same structure of organization. अब ये आते हैं with scientific rational thought. Let us abolish entire state government and local government. The entire federal structure is destroyed. जो कुछ बना हुआ था, जैसे बना हुआ था, we have to recreate it from the start. So they go for replaced with a more centralized and rational system. They create 83 departments. Provinces are now called as departments. पूरे देश में 83 states होंगे. All of them would have same structure of government. System of intendants was abolished. Intendant मतलब जो governor था. Governor of the province was appointed by the king, and he used to act as agent of king more and less as a representative of common people. So अब वहाँ पे no more intendant, which was a hated system. Instead, what you have is elected assemblies at local level. So general council and executive council etc. were created at provincial level. So state government बना दिया आपने. Then below the state you have district, and within district you have cantons. So district, sub district, सब कुछ आपने बना दिया. So everything is rationalized. Municipal government was in the hands of communes. So municipality बन गई. They were called communes, and communes were elected by the people. So what you have is decentralization of power. But perhaps because these people don't have experience, they go for experiments. And when you go for experiments, sometimes you are bound to fail. And you learn with experimentation only. So here they actually go for lots of experimentation, lots of democratization, too much. So much so, ये system भी collapse हो जाती है. Again, anarchy comes. Ultimately, Napoleon जब आएगा तो कहेगा बहुत हो गया. थोड़ा तो power रखो center के पास. कितना नीचे दे दोगे आप? So it is actually a good-hearted attempt with lack of experience leading to more chaos. Then you have judicial principles also changing. No longer arbitrary arrest. People have the right to defend themselves. Judges were to be elected, and justice of peace in every canton. Appeal courts at national level. So you create judicial hierarchy also. So economy, democracy, administration, and judiciary are recreated. Simple. Now you go for economy also. The problem that happened because of such kind of democratic decentralization is one fundamental problem that we see even in India today. कि पैसे कहाँ पे? पंचायत के पास. काम कैसे करेंगे? So they have very less income. The states and the departments, the cantons, the communes did not have source of income. You have given them lots of function. People are electing other people. देयर लॉट्स ऑफ होप्स, बट बिना पैसे कैसे करोगे? एक आती है एकदम भन्नाट आइडिया, एकदम ऐसी आइडिया की खुराफाती आइडिया, एक करते हैं 1/3 ऑफ द फ्रांस की जमीन जो है इट इज विद द रोमन कैथोलिक चर्च, उसको नंगा कर देते हैं। जहां जहां जिस जिस डिपार्टमेंट में जमीन है सारी जमीन, नेशनलाइजेशन ऑफ एंटायर चर्च प्रॉपर्टी टू सॉल्व द प्रॉब्लम ऑफ मनी फॉर एवर कर देते। So they actually did that. Entire church property was confiscated and every department and commune got their own national property to solve the problem. So it nationalized the lands of the Roman Catholic Church in France to pay off all the issues including public debt. War चल सकता है, अगर war चलेगा या कुछ दिक्कत होगी, पैसे कहाँ से आएंगे? Public debt देना है तो जमीन ले लो। Not only that, against this church property, they start publishing a paper currency called assignment. Or I don't know how to pronounce it, assignment. Let us call it assignment. So there is a person at that time, he is very wise. He said, don't do that. Assignment paper currency will destroy the economy. Again, people are not experienced. उत्साह में हम सब change करेंगे, कर दो change. So what happened is that this money was used, it was printed, it was distributed everywhere. Over the next 1 to 2 years, उसकी value इतनी गिर गई. Within 1 year, it 84% से गिर गई. And gradually so it became deflation. So anyway, the assembly preferred free trade and removal of control. Toll barriers हटा दिए थे, grain trade barriers हटा दिए थे. So because who wants to do all this trade? The people who want to do business, मतलब mercantile community, middle class again. But they did not foresee if you have complete free trade without state intervention in market, तो grain के दाम बढ़ सकते हैं. लोअर क्लास माइट फाइंड फूड अनअफोर्डेबल. जैसे आज के दिन में यहाँ होता है, टमाटो महंगा हो गया, प्याज महंगा हो गया, तो वहाँ ग्रेन महंगे हो गए, क्या करोगे? द स्टेट डिड नॉट कीप इटसेल्फ एनी अथॉरिटी टू एंटर इन मार्केट. अगेन इट इज अ ब्लाइंडनेस ऑफ मिडिल क्लास टुवर्ड्स लोअर क्लास. अगेन एग्जाम्पल, यू आर गोइंग फॉर कंप्लीट फ्री ग्रेन ट्रेड, दाम बढ़ेंगे तो समस्या तो गरीबों को होनी है, बट यू हैव नॉट प्रोवाइडेड फॉर एनी सोल्यूशन फॉर दैट प्रॉब्लम. Then you come to the secularization church. There was an intense feeling of anti-clericalism. कि ये पादरी लोग जो है, they are creating problems. We don't want this clergy to be powerful. Intense anti-clericalism was the feeling amongst the revolutionaries, but some of them extended that anti-clericalism into anti-Christianity. That much was the anger. Some of them even were anti-Christians. अब हमें चर्च को खत्म करना है, want to nationalize everything. So that went to such a level where they initiated a new thing called as civil constitution of the clergy. It is the most controversial thing, civil constitution of the clergy. It's very controversial, so much so that we'll keep referring to it even in Napoleon's era. Even some of the things we will see the resonance in the era of Bismarck, resonance in the era of Hitler also. Civil constitution of clergy. बात क्या है? बात simple ये है that it separated the church of France from the Pope. रोम में बैठ के पोप हमें नहीं बताएगा हमारे चर्च में क्या होगा. If the church is within the boundary of French as a nation, its decisions will be taken by French people and not by the outside person. That was the whole idea. What it did is to democratize the religion and disown the connection with the Pope. So it would no longer have 135 bishops, but only 83 bishops. Why 83? Because there were 83 departments, and for every department you have a corresponding bishop. The second thing it did was election of bishops and parish priests by the people rather than their appointment by the people. लोग अपने अपने इलाके के चर्च का बिशप चुनेंगे. Thirdly, state would have control over the appointment and dismissal of clergy. State will decide कौन बनेगा कहाँ पे. Fourthly, anointment of the provincial bishop by the bishops in the capital, and the provincial bishop will anoint other people. मतलब टीका लगाने की जो बात होती कि आपसे आप काम कर सकते हो, ये भी अंदर ही होगा, बाहर से, रोम से नहीं होगा. The salary of all these people would come from government, because government now controls all the church land. तो चर्च का पैसा गवर्नमेंट के पास ऑलरेडी आ चुका है. गवर्नमेंट थिंक्स it is a wise decision because the 1/3 of land gives government so much money that to pay the salaries of church is only 1/10 or 1/15 of तो फायदा हो रहा है. गवर्नमेंट सैलरी हम देंगे, आपकी जमीन सर हमें दे दो, सैलरी हम दे देंगे. And then clergy, the most controversial. Clergy was supposed to take the oath of loyalty of the constitution. Half of the clergy said no, nahi lenge. And they gradually went towards counter revolution. Half of them took the oath. Clergy के बीच में एकदम दीवार खड़ी हो गई. Right in the middle, vertical crisis within the church. Some people who took the oath are pro-government. The clergy which did not take the oath are anti-national. And वो बहुत ही मतलब रोमन चर्च के अंदर दरारें पड़ गई. In case of France, that became a very violent issue. The clergy which did not take the oath got the support from all across Europe कि आपने सही किया. So people in France got angry कि भाई ये क्या हो रहा है. पहले राजा बनने की कोशिश कर रहा है, फिर इमिग्रेट्स जा रहे हैं. Now clergy is half not complete, not all clergy are pro France. ये भी गद्दार नहीं कहीं. तो ये गद्दार करते सब, मतलब दिस इज नाउ ब्रांडेड एज टुकड़े टुकड़े गैंग. आज की भाषा में बात एंटी नेशनल. तो पूरा जो कॉन्टिनेंट ऑफ यूरोप है, दे आर स्टिल इन द मेडिवल एज. दे स्टिल हैव द ओल्ड एंशियन रेजिम. दे हैव द किंग, दे हैव फ्यूडलिज्म, दे हैव रोमन चर्च. जहाँ जहाँ है वहाँ वहाँ ऑल ऑफ देम सपोर्ट कि भाई हमारे भाई को मारा जा रहा है, यहाँ पे मदद करो इनकी. सो द डोमेस्टिक रिवोल्यूशन becomes a continental revolution. If it has to succeed in France, it has to succeed in entire Europe. एक जगह नहीं चलेगा. समझ में आ रहा है? पक्का? So it virtually made the church a department of the government. With all this salary and everything, church is government department. You see, even today, as I discussed, French secularism is extreme level. Laicite. कहाँ से आता है laicite? शुरुआत यहाँ पे होती है. It was rejected by the Pope, and finally comes the Constitution. Constitution is very interesting. It took almost 2 years, since 89 to 91. What were the provisions? We shall see the provisions in 2 parts about the monarchy and about legislature. Although एक आपको समझना है जरूरी है. If a question is asked only and only on the first constitution, this one first constitution, वैसे पूछा नहीं जाएगा. बट अगर इत्तफाकन पूछा तो हमने शुरू से सारा किया जो है एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव, जुडिशियल, इकोनॉमिक, एवरीथिंग विच वाज डन अर्लियर लेटर ऑन मेड पार्ट ऑफ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन. ठीक है, सिविल क्वेश्चन ऑफ क्लर्जी भी आएगी. तो इफ द क्वेश्चन इज ओनली ऑन द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, डू नॉट रिस्ट्रिक्ट योर आंसर ओनली टू मोनार्की एंड असेंबली. ये चीज़ें अभी ऐड हुई है. इसमें बात एडिशनल चैप्टर्स भी है. इन ऑल दो चैप्टर्स जो हमने पहले किया है अभी, वो सारा शामिल किया गया बाद में. ठीक है, तो ये सब कलेक्टिवली आता है. इट इज कॉल्ड कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन. बट यहाँ पे विल सी ओनली व्हाट वाज एडिशनल. ठीक है, पक्का? सो इट वाज नॉट अ रिपब्लिक बट अ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोनार्की. चेंज इन किंग्स टाइटल. लुई बाय द ग्रेस ऑफ गॉड किंग ऑफ फ्रांस एंड नावार was his old title. Now the new title is Louis by the grace of God and the constitutional will of the people, the king of the French. So popular sovereignty of Rousseau is seen even in the title of the king. He is king of the French. So he is not king of France. He is king of French. Matlab, he is not the owner of land. He is representing people. No more king of France. He is king of French. French citizens are important. Then it limited the powers of the king, but king actually still had lot of power. Even in the constitution, he was given very much executive role. For example, the king retained substantial executive authority, जैसे कि he could appoint the ambassadors, he could appoint the bishops, he could appoint the ministers, he could take lots of executive decisions. तो उसको दिया था. It was not anti-monarchical yet. It is not that radical. Although it is radical, but it is not that radical. Most of his orders had to be countersigned by the minister who was sort of responsible for the assembly. So his powers were powers more on the paper than in reality. In reality, there was a check on his powers by Constituent by the Legislative Assembly. Okay. There were actually 25 million livre ka civil list, which was under his own personal authority. But anyway, then you go to Assembly. You have the Montesquieu concept of separation of power getting implemented. It introduced a unicameral legislature, simple unicameral legislature, and limited franchise. Now this limit, it is an interesting thing. Franchise से बात कर रहे हैं equality, liberty, fraternity, but it is applicable not for everybody, only for the people who have property, only for middle class. So voting power, who has got voting power? People who have property, middle class. So what they did very interestingly, they divided the population into two types: active citizens and passive citizens. Active citizens are those who can pay taxes, they have all the rights. The passive citizens are those who don't have property, don't pay taxes, they don't have voting right. Like women don't have property ownership, so they don't have voting right. And there were system ऐसे थी, total 4.3 million people, 43 लाख लोग थे, who were active citizens, who paid some sort of tax. They are at the primary level. They would elect 50,000 electors, second level, and those would elect the deputies in the assembly. So दो level पे election था. जनता, मतलब if I actually draw a diagram, let us say this is all French. In that you have active citizens and you have passive citizens. In the active citizens, this is 4.3 million. You have 50,000, only this much. So these are primary, these are secondary. And within that, you have only few who are deputies. Right? So where if you pay some amount of tax, at least 3 days of tax every year, you are active primary. If you pay 10 days of wages equal to tax, you go to secondary. And if you pay at least 25 livres as a tax annually, you are eligible to become a deputy. तो प्रॉपर्टी क्वालिफिकेशन भी टीयर्स में थे. अगर आप छोटा टैक्स भरते हो तो आप प्राइमरी लेवल पे वोट कर सकते हो. अगर आप अधिक टैक्स भरते हो तो आप सेकंड लेवल पे वोट कर सकते हो. इफ यू पे मोर टैक्स देन ओनली यू आर एलिजिबल टू बी इलेक्टेड एज एमपी ऑफ योर नेशन. ठीक है, समझ में आया? तो एक्टिव सिटीजन्स एंड पैसिव सिटीजन्स. एंड वुमन हैड नो प्रॉपर्टी राइट एंड बेसिक सिविल राइट्स वर ऑलरेडी गिवन, जो हमने देखे ऑलरेडी इन द डॉक्टर मैक. So thus, in this constitution, the hegemony of the middle class was present. The influence of the middle class could be seen on this new constitution. This is the reason why political balance and social harmony were emphasized in this constitution. Social harmony किसको चाहिए? इसके पास कुछ खोने के लिए है middle class. Lower class never bothers social harmony. तो चाहिए economic equality. Thus, the National Constituent Assembly completed the abolition of feudalism, suppressed the old orders, established civil equality among the men, and made more than half of the adult male population eligible to vote. What is significant is that career was open to the talent. It marked very definitely the end of the special privileges which the upper orders enjoyed earlier. It ended the old France. It was given a new legal, administrative, and social basis. Finally, in September, the assembly dissolved itself. अब तो डिसोल्यूशन हो गया है. नाउ द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन विल गेट ऑपरेटिव, पीपल विल इलेक्ट द पीपल. अब यहाँ पे ना दो चीजें बड़ी मजेदार होती है. अनफॉर्चुनेट, देखो एक्सपीरियंस ना होने से क्या होता है. द किंग हैड नो एक्सपीरियंस, द किंग वाज इर्रेजोल्यूट एंड वीक. अगर वो चुपचाप बैठा रहता ना, आज के दिन में भी बोर्बन लोग होते, लाइक इन केस ऑफ इंग्लैंड, बट यहाँ पे नहीं था. तो ही, if he wanted, he could have made this work. He did not do that. People lost all the trust. Ultimately, Sir considered, and this constitution also failed. But behind this failure, there was one other reason. When the election started, लोग बहुत ज़्यादा उदार बन गए. For some reason which I could not find why, they had one rule. All the people who, for last 2.5 years, took part into the Constituent Assembly, they are ineligible to stand for election. सब बाहर. खुद ने डिसाइड कर लिया, हमने एक बनाई कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, वी शुड वेकेट द प्लेस और जनता विल सेंड देयर ओन रिप्रेजेंटेटिव। सबसे बड़ी गलती करी उन्होंने, इंडिया में नहीं हुआ है। इंडिया में द पीपल हु असेंबली, दे कुड इलेक्ट, दे कुड गेट इलेक्टेड इन द इलेक्शन ऑफ 51 52, मेजोरिटी लोग वहीं चुन के आए थे। इन द फर्स्ट लोकसभा वही लोग ज्यादा बड़े थे, उनका एक्सपीरियंस था काम चलाने का। दे हैड क्रिएटेड कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, दे रन इट फॉर कपल ऑफ जनरेशन, कपल ऑफ लोकसभा। यहाँ पे जो कोई एक्सपीरियंस विजडम वाला अनुभव है, सब लोग बाहर जो चुन के आते हैं, दोज पीपल हु फॉर्म द फर्स्ट लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली आर ऑल न्यू पीपल, inexperienced, more prone to violence and random people. तो दो गलतियां हुई, अदरवाइज एक राजा की तरफ से, एक इनकी तरफ से, अदरवाइज दिस कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन वुड हैव एंडेड द रिवॉल्यूशन हियर ओनली, एंड नहीं हो पाए। ठीक है, वो कहानी हम कल देखें। एनी डाउट? वी हैव वन कमेंट। ओके, 2 अकाउंट्स कल बात है, ठीक है, नो प्रॉब्लम, नो इश्यूज। तो आई थिंक टॉपिक इज क्लियर, देन रुक जाते हैं फिर। ठीक है, ओके, मन नहीं लग रहा? चलो, बाय देन, थैंक यू। कल तो संडे है ना, कल क्लास में मंडे ही हुई क्लास, मंडे मंडे मेरी क्लास होगी।